higher taxes.
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
So a new poll has revealed that Gen Z or Gen Z, I don't know how I'm supposed to say it, and British boys and men are more likely to believe that feminism has done more harm than good when compared with older respondents. So the polling also found that a quarter of UK males aged 16 to 29 believe it's harder to be a man than a woman, with 1 in 5 looking favourably upon controversial influencer Andrew Tate. 37% of them also agree that the phrase toxic masculinity is unhelpful. So, with Gen Z boys increasingly holding this view, has feminism done more harm than good? Let me know your thoughts. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.com, tweet me @gbnews, and make sure you take part in our poll. But I'll bring you those results shortly. Going head-to-head on this tonight are author and commentator Anna May Mangan and YouTuber and social media influencer Pearl Davies. Both of you, thank you very much. Pearl, I'll start with you. Has feminism done more harm than good, especially when it comes to these Gen Z boys?
Yes, it has. Feminism really has turned into a bunch of crybaby women that want to complain that we're not given equal opportunity when really women are given more opportunity than men. And so, yeah, I would say feminism is a hate group and it's a bunch of crybaby women.
Anna, would you like to come back to that? Crybaby women feminism, apparently.
So we've got a right lad with us tonight with Pearl and her opinions, haven't we? How could it possibly do harm? Pearl wouldn't do. I hope you vote. I assume you do. I hope you're not chained to the kitchen sink at home. I'm not sure if you've got a job, so I don't know very much about you, but you're probably, if there's a bloke doing the same thing as you, you're probably earning less than him. So of course feminism is something that it got us the vote in the first place, and it's still doing a power of good. It's just whingy men, and actually I changed that. They're lads, they're not men.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Good morning. It is 6 o'clock on Friday, the 1st of March. Today.
This is for Gaza.
George Galloway wins the Rochdale by-election with a landslide victory, almost 40% of the vote following a controversial campaign.
That's right, George Galloway is back in Parliament as MP for Rochdale after a 9-year break, and he says Sir Keir Starmer will pay a high price for his stance on Gaza.
To remove
a climate change denier. You said in the hustings that you wanted to extract oil and gas from the North Sea.
He faced backlash within seconds of his victory, but surprisingly, it was not about Gaza, but his apparent climate change denial. And here is the stark message for the Labour leader.
I think Keir Starmer's woken up this morning to his worst nightmare.
And that is as Nigel Farage warned about sectarian politics in the United Kingdom.
Is it? Sectarian politics is here to stay. People thought the result in 2012 in Bradford West was a complete one-off. It wasn't. It was a warning shot. This is voting along religious lines, allied to some extreme hard left characters like the Chris Williamsons. No, this is real.
Also this morning, the government's flagship Rwanda policy could end up costing more than £600 million to deport 300 refugees, according to a spending watchdog.
Beautiful gardens, eternal flowers. You know the way, so take me there. Won't you make me dizzy?
Ollie Alexander releases his Eurovision 2024 entry Dizzy, with the music video out later this morning.
And a very happy St David's Day to everyone celebrating in Wales.
Good morning. It's a cold day out there for many areas and there's some snow due for some. Find out all the details with me a little later on.
Good morning, I'm Pip Thompson.
Good morning, I'm Michael Portillo, and happy St David's Day to you everywhere. And this is Breakfast on GB News.
A very good morning to you and a massive good morning to Michael Portillo
Well,
here on
thank you very much,
Breakfast
Pip.
for the very first time.
Indeed it is.
And what a day to be on.
Well, I think this is a by-election that's going to be remembered in decades to come. I mean, I go back a long way in politics. I remember by-elections from 1962, Orpington. This one is right up there. In 20 years' time, people will be on programmes like this and they'll be talking about the Rochdale by-election, because what has happened here, George Galloway is quite right to point this out, is that both major parties have been massacred. We're used to a situation where the governing party is massacred, but in this case, the Conservatives and the Labour Party have been massacred. Liberal Democrats too, by the way, and they've been massacred by George Galloway, a very articulate, a very charismatic, a very effective campaigner, representing, in this case, not only the cause of Gaza and many Muslim voters, but also, of course, remember, he is a man with a far-left history who, even in recent times, was supporting Jeremy Corbyn.
And it's such a dramatic night. Does it ever make you nostalgic for the political arena again, or does it actually give you the heebie-jeebies? Because we still talk about the Portillo moment, don't we?
Yes, but on the other hand, I'm quite an unusual person because I won 2 by-elections in London. I won one when my party was in government, the other when we were in opposition. And actually to win 2 by-elections in London is pretty unusual, particularly if you're the governing party. I mean, we've seen the Conservatives lose one by-election after the other. So although my general election figures are not too good, my by-election statistics are phenomenal. In fact, 100%.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, if you are just waking up this morning, let's bring you bang up to date, because George Galloway of the Workers' Party of Britain has won one of the most divisive and controversial by-election contests in recent history.
Turnout at the by-election was 39.7%, which was higher than expected. This was Galloway's message to Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer.
Keir Starmer, this is for Gaza. You have paid and you will pay a high price for the role that you have played in enabling, encouraging and covering for the catastrophe presently going on in occupied Palestine in the Gaza Strip.
Joining us now is our political editor, Christopher Hope. Christopher, a very long, exciting night for you. In the words of George Galloway, has the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, this morning woken up to his worst nightmare?
Well, morning, Pip, and morning, Michael. I mean, it is a complete disaster for the Labour Party. They, of course, had their candidate on the ballot paper, didn't they, Azhar Ali, but the party itself had disowned him over remarks he was recorded making about Gaza back in October, which emerged after the nominations had closed for this by-election. Labour, of course, coming fourth behind the Tory party, the governing Tory party in third. An independent David Tully, a lifetime season ticket holder of Rochdale FC, concerned about local hospital issues. He came second, and Galloway, of course, first with a near 6,000 majority. Yes, it'll be difficult for him because I think the whole Gaza controversy, the issue with Israel and Hamas in Gaza is not going away anytime soon. And as soon as that comes up in the House of Commons, you're going to hear George Galloway trying to make the case of why Labour must call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and more besides that. The Labour vote collapsed, such as it was, by 43%. It's a disaster for the main parties, as Michael Portillo says eloquently. This seat, of course, held by Sir Tony Lloyd until his death earlier this year, since 2010. So 14 years a Labour seat, and now it's a Workers' Party of Britain. And he's not stopped here. He's saying to us he's going to stand in 59 seats across the country at the upcoming general election.
Christopher, Michael here. Excuse me, just wondering whether, given the scale of this disaster, do you think that what happened with the Labour candidate was absolutely crucial to the result? Or do you have a feeling, I must confess that I do, that Galloway would have stormed through the middle of this by-election anyway?
I think that is, if you look at the scale of votes going towards independents, that it looks quite likely, but we'll never know that. But certainly the fact that Ali was disowned, there's no visit coming here from any party leader to welcome the new candidate, the new MP for Rochdale, I should say. No, I think you could well be right. I think his force of personality, the way he targeted the Muslim vote here for the votes on Gaza, he made Gaza his first lines as MP for Rochdale was, "This is for Gaza," not saying this is for Rochdale or Rochdale issues. He saw this as an issue, the international debate about Gaza imprinted on this Lancashire town. I should say also, by the way, the Reform Party, Salman Danchuk, the former MP for Rochdale, Labour MP for Rochdale, now the candidate for Reform, had a disastrous night, coming sixth with fewer than 2,000 votes, and some thought he may have done a lot better than that because of his history here, the way he exposed the late Lib Dem Rochdale MP Cyril Smith with the issues he had with sexual abuse. Some thought he would do better, but no, I think George Galloway has swept all before him, and now we look forward to next week when he is introduced as an MP in Parliament, and what comes next is anyone's guess.
Absolutely. Political editor Christopher Hope, thanks very much. That was a really interesting question you just asked, Michael. I would expect nothing less, but fascinating that he might have romped home anyway.
Well, and Galloway is a really charismatic campaigner, I've already said that. I thought the Labour candidate who was disowned, Ali, was not particularly charismatic. It looked as though he got himself in difficulty because he was trying to compete with Galloway. He was trying to say things that would capture the radicalism of the left and the radicalism possibly of the Muslim voter. And he tipped himself over the edge. I mean, in a way, it was typical that he was so clumsy as to do that, whereas Galloway has, just sailed the way through. I just think, I mean, it was being said before the by-election that many voters wouldn't realise that the Labour candidate had been disowned and therefore the Labour candidate might do quite well. Well, a lot of people will be eating their words today, because what is very clear is that the voters were very aware of Galloway as a campaigner. And, I mean, that's both very bad news this morning for Labour, but it's also good news in the sense that there is only one Galloway, so it can't be repeated in every seat in the country.
And he's been saying that this is going to start a movement. So is it?
What we need to tease out, I think, during the course of this programme is not so much whether it's going to cause a movement as to whether it's going to cause a panic. Right. Is it going to cause a panic in the Labour Party? Because Galloway has been saying millions of votes ride on this, and they're not just the Muslim votes, they're other people who are appalled by Labour's stance on Gaza, and he called it the so-called Labour Party. In other words, they're appalled also by its stance, that's not left-wing enough. Now, I think quite a lot of Labour MPs and Labour candidates will be a bit worried about what's going to happen to them. My own analysis would be that in England, this vote that they might be losing has nowhere else to go. But in Scotland, it does. In Scotland, that vote can go to the Scottish National Party, which is why last week's rumpus in the House of Commons was so significant, because the Scottish National Party was trying to show itself as being more radical, more in favour of a ceasefire than the Labour Party. And obviously the Scottish National Party think that matters for gaining seats. And obviously the Labour Party thought so too, because it fought tooth and nail to change Labour Party procedure.
OK, well, we'll dig into that a little bit more very shortly. What I want to bring you all first, though, is an exclusive interview that George Galloway has given to us overnight, very shortly after his win. Take a listen to this.
I think the revival of the civic spirit in the town is vital, and unity is important for that. But it wasn't me that dragged Rochdale's name in the dirt. It was Labour, first in covering up the grooming scandal, and secondly in imploding with the anti-Semitic comments made by the Labour candidate. We were trending for 2 full days that week, and it wasn't in a good way, and it wasn't about me. So divisive is not really a charge, I think, that can be laid against me. I've just won a thumping majority in a by-election.
You have it. So Keir Starmer is calling for a ceasefire now. Biden is hopeful it will happen. Are you? And would you lay off him in that instant? It doesn't seem like there's any prospect of you laying off Keir Starmer.
Or any prospect of them actually genuinely seeking an end to the war in Gaza. I've been saying that anyone who believes Keir Starmer is trying to end the war in Gaza, I've got a bridge in London I could sell them going cheap. It is a totally unbelievable pretense. If he really did, he would have backed the SNP motion in Parliament, or at least not tried to wreck it, which is what he did. And he tried to wreck it because what he is asking for is a different thing to what the SNP were asking for. And what the SNP were asking for was a genuine ceasefire.
And just finally, it sounds like you've got big plans for this new party of yours. Do you hope to replicate this in seats across the country and in other constituencies come the election?
Yeah, especially in this region. I don't know what will happen elsewhere in the country, but I have now received deputations from Bolton, from Oldham, from Blackburn, from Bury, and from Tameside in Greater Manchester, and that's just the deputations I've received. We've got 59 parliamentary candidates ready to go, and we'll stand in, therefore, 70 Labour seats, and either defeat them ourselves or cause their defeat. And there will be independents, not Workers' Party, but independents that we're ready to support, who will stand up and down the country, and I know of many already in the field who will now be energised by the result here tonight. I think Keir Starmer's woken up this morning to his worst nightmare.
Well, that was George Galloway speaking a very short time ago to our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Let's talk about and analyse all this more now with former Special Advisor Charlie Rowley and former Labour MP Dennis McShane. Good morning to you both. Let's react first of all then to George Galloway's warning there, Dennis. This is Keir Starmer's worst nightmare. Or is it actually just a little dream?
George is 70 this year. He's founded, I think, 4 parties. He's been briefly MP after he sort of left Labour and mainstream politics in by-elections. He's a marvellous speaker. I've known him for 40 years. A compelling, powerful speaker. But all his parties crash and burn. And he gets his metaphors wrong. You don't wake up to a nightmare. You have a nightmare by falling asleep. So, again, it's early in the morning for him, as I say. He always wears this funny hat.
Dennis. This is always smooth talk, and you've clearly rehearsed your line this morning.
No, I haven't. I just got out of bed.
Let's have some lovely analysis from you, please.
What
is going to happen in the Labour Party? What is going to happen to those people fighting seats in Scotland, for example, who will be pretty unnerved. By the way, it's not coincidental that Galloway is a Scot, who will be pretty unnerved by the fact that here the Labour Party has been trounced, and the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats, of course. Yes. But this is bad news for those people hoping to win seats in Scotland. And in England, too, it looks like a lot of votes could go begging.
On Scotland, I mean, that's been a problem for the Labour Party now for a number of years. It was certainly looking better because of the implosion of the SNP. Yes. That hasn't gone away. The scandals, the allegations, the incompetence of the current leader in Scotland. Stephen Flynn in Parliament is a very good spokesman for the SNP, but I thought he blew it last week as he was screeching like a banshee at the Speaker in a very ugly way.
Can I bring you back to the issue? Galloway has just won an enormous victory. He's humiliated your party, he's humiliated my party, he's humiliated the Liberal Democrats. Let's focus on that.
Michael, I'm very happy to focus on it. Now, you didn't have a very good general election, but at least you got a good number of votes. Only 39%. I mean, of the people turned up.
Well, that's better than was expected, Dennis.
Well, you can say that, but it's still only 39%. All right, I'll put it this way. Galloway is good and Rochdale, for other reasons, is bad. If they get an attractive Rochdalian candidate for Labour in the next month or so, I'm not sure Galloway's going to be there
I'm not going to bet on air because Rishi did that recently. It's not a good idea. But I wouldn't mind saying that I think there's a very good chance Galloway will come back. But look, even if you, Dennis, ex-MP, if I may say so,
very much so,
are very, very relaxed about all this, I just don't think many of your colleagues are going to be quite as relaxed as you are. This is a pretty frightening result.
I'll happily talk to him. I already have started a bit. I'm not getting any sense of that. He is such an outsider, such a maverick, and he always alienates people. He runs great campaigns and then loses support very fast. I mean, he has won 4 other big by-elections and was out at the next election. That's called form, I understand, in the racing world.
Yes.
So, I mean, but that said, Gaza has been completely misread by both the government and, I'm afraid, to a large extent, by Labour. This is utterly momentous. We were all talking a couple of days ago, Joe Biden, we're going to have a deal, and then the Israelis yesterday killed all those people as the relief lorries came into Gaza. So they're just not, Netanyahu is not interested in any deal at all. He wants to continue his policy of...
OK, well, on that point, let's just speak to you, Charlie Rowley. When this war in Gaza ends, which it will at some point, the movement will just dry up, will it not? George Galloway's Workers' Party of Britain, because this is what he stood on.
It's a brilliant question. I'm not sure whether it'll dry up completely because there will always be people who have a different view of what the solution should be in terms of whether it's a two-state solution or whether it's, whatever. So I think, there will always be people with different views on that in the Middle East. But in terms of the election victory, it's not a dream, it's not a nightmare. It is a reality, and it is a scary one for Labour MPs. And I'm glad Dennis has been already talking to Labour Party colleagues even before 6:20 this morning to get their view.
Well, a Labour Party spokesman has been speaking in the last few minutes, apologising for the people of Rochdale. For not being able to field a candidate, and he's saying that George Galloway only won because Labour did not stand.
And it is an excruciating and embarrassing night for the Labour Party. If you ask Sir Keir Starmer waking up this morning, this is a safe Labour seat held by the brilliant Sir Tony Lloyd, who tragically died. It should have been a walk-in for the Labour Party, and because of their campaigning, because of their lack of vetting, their lack of process, their candidate that was espousing clearly anti-Semitic views couldn't be ditched or dropped quick enough. In fact, the Labour Party stood by this guy for weeks on end, it seemed to me, that was front-page news. It is a disaster of a campaign, and it's something that the Labour Party should absolutely be worried about.
Pip and Charlie, I think between you have raised a really important issue, which is whether the genie goes back in the bottle. In other words, we have seen, I think, a big change in British politics recently. Religion has become more important. A foreign war has become more important. Politics have been more divisive. We've been talking about intimidation. We've been talking about whether our democratic processes are being prejudiced by what is going on, whether Parliament changed its procedures the other day. And the question you asked, Pip, was, you know, will it all pop back once the war is over? Well, firstly, goodness knows whether the war will ever be regarded as being over. This is a struggle that's already lasted many decades. But I must say it would be my feeling that we won't just put the genie back in the bottle.
Well, I think if you look at the... I think it was one of the leaflets that George Galloway put out that said it was a vote for George Galloway and Palestine, or it was Sir Keir Starmer's Israel. So that divisive kind of talk on an election leaflet itself showed that this vote and this what George was obviously seeking was a vote for the people of Palestine. So that division, that sort of approach in terms of campaigning is something that's been articulated in this particular by-election. Could that be happening going forward? Could that be something that, obviously, when George Galloway is obviously on the backbenches, challenging Sir Keir Starmer in whatever role he is, whether he's still the leader of the opposition or as Prime Minister, when it comes to this particular region, it won't go away, but everybody will have a different view as to the outcome of the resolution.
May I pick up with you, Dennis? You said a very interesting thing a moment ago. You said that Labour has got it wrong on Gaza. Do you now imagine that Sir Keir Starmer, who actually is pretty doggedly held out for his position, will now have to change his position on the ceasefire to something more like the SNP position?
Not particularly on the SNP, because they are so violently anti-Israel, and that would be unthinkable, I think, to the Labour Party and to Sir Keir himself. Let's not forget, Michael, because you kindly mentioned I'm out of Parliament. You were out of Parliament already by the Iraq War, when George again won a giant by-election victory on we must support, condemn America, condemn Britain, Blair is a mass murderer, and so on and so on. And at the general election, he was out. I'm just not quite convinced. I mean, Rochdale's always been held by Labour, whether it's a very good guy like my friend Tony Lloyd, or rather less impressive Labour MPs like me, as it were. So we'll see. My own inclination, having not both of us have watched by-elections over the years, it's always shock, horror, excitement, and then not quite by Monday, George will sign into the Commons on Tuesday, I think, or maybe at Wednesday after Prime Minister's questions. Then he's properly an MP, and then he'll just have to go and deliver something for Rochdale.
That's going to be a moment, isn't it? George Galloway back in the House of Commons.
Well, not really, because you sign. He keeps coming back and he keeps leaving again. As I say, he's 70. He's got to think about retirement. He's a number of wives, a number of children, and he deserves a good retirement.
I'm certainly going to call you out for ageism at this point. I don't see what his age has.
I'm the oldest person here. I'm older than George, so there we are. I'm allowed to.
OK, let's have a very quick break from all the political talk, because we have a very important weather forecast for you with Annie Shuttleworth.
Hello, good morning and welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie, from the Met Office. Some heavy rain will push into southwestern areas through the rest of the day. There's also a risk of some sleet and snow over the hills. But the heaviest rain will push from the southwest, affecting southwestern areas of England and parts of South Wales. That's where there's a weather warning in force throughout today. But this band of rain will push into more northern areas of England. That will fall as snow over the high ground above around 250 metres mainly. So lower levels will mainly just see rain. But we also see some quite blustery showers following in behind that across many southern and central areas, and it's going to be feeling rather chilly out there today, particularly on any coastal areas and in any showers where we've got quite a strong wind. Through tonight, it's going to be staying quite unsettled. Many areas will see further rain. That band will push into more northern areas, into parts of Scotland where it could bring a further risk of some sleet and snow, potentially some ice on the roads. It's going to be a frostier start where we do see any clear skies developing to Saturday morning, but much of the rain will be restricted to eastern areas throughout the morning on Saturday, particularly across northeastern areas of England. That's where we could see some further snow falling over the high ground. Further south, it should be a little bit drier through the morning, but there will be some showers pushing in across coastal areas by the afternoon. These bring a risk of some hail and some heavy downpours, and it will still feel chilly once again on Saturday. It does look a little bit drier and brighter on Sunday, though. Bye-bye.
More political analysis on the Rochdale by-election in just a moment. That will be next. This is Breakfast on GB News with Pip and Michael.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
Lots of people have different ideas, but principally a conservative approach to getting growth is to reduce taxes so that people, ordinary people and businesses can spend more of their own money to invest and grow the economy.
So the theory is that you cut taxes and that then pumps more money into the economy.
Exactly right. And then people, it's not government that are creating wealth. It's individuals, businessmen, companies that create wealth. It's the private sector that creates wealth, that the public sector then taxes and spends.
I get the theory, but one of the criticisms of you, and I think one of the criticisms actually of all political parties, is they appear to be incapable of cutting government spending.
That's the key. I mean, and I think when I look back, is that we should have had a credible plan to reduce the increase in spending. Now, that's often a difficult concept to explain,
but it's in line with inflation, etc.
That's all right. So when you're slowing the increase, it means 1 year you spend £100, and the next year you spend maybe £101, as opposed to going up to £110. So the actual level isn't going down, but you're slowing the increase. And that's very much what I tried to do. And actually, looking back, the one thing I wish I'd done, was to present a credible spending plan at the same time as the tax cuts that we announced.
You had a go, it didn't work out for whatever reason, and that analysis will go on for some years to come. We have Jeremy Hunt there as Chancellor now, hinting quite strongly now there won't be any tax cuts, but the truth of it is, under 14 years of Conservatives, for a variety of reasons, the tax burden has risen.
That's right.
To the highest since the Attlee government, way back in
80 years,
1951,
years,
whatever it is.
Welcome back to Breakfast. Good morning. You're watching and listening to us with Pip Thompson and Michael Portillo.
And here is a reminder of our top story. Controversial left-wing firebrand George Galloway has won the Rochdale by-election. The former Labour MP, who was standing for the Workers' Party of Britain, won 12,335 votes, a majority of 5,697. And joining us now is political commentator Andy Williams. Welcome very much to GB News.
Morning.
So, we have been debating this morning whether this is significant, a flash in the pan. Is Galloway a one-off? Should Labour be worried? What is your analysis?
Well, I think you said just before the break, Michael, that there is only one George Galloway, and I think there are unique circumstances here. It's an unusual by-election. There are particular issues at play. He is as you said, a very charismatic, a very visible person, and I think I'd be very surprised if this was replicated at the general election. Labour have just put out a statement where they said if Labour had stood a serious candidate, because there were really serious issues with the person who was nominated to be the Labour candidate at this by-election. If Labour had stood a proper candidate, they would have won this by-election. I think that would be the case.
Oh, you believe that, do you? Because I think this is such an enormous victory for Galloway that I really have to doubt, even if Labour Party had thrown its resources, the Labour Party had thrown its resources behind a candidate. I mean, what I saw of their erstwhile candidate, Mr. Ali, he was not a patch on Galloway. I mean, Galloway is a tremendous campaigner. But you stick by the view, do you, that if Labour had fought a fully fledged campaign and be behind its candidate, it would have held this seat?
I do. And I agree with you. It's a bigger majority than I would have expected. And, there's no doubt about it. It's an amazing result for George Galloway. I think
that majority, just to tell listeners and viewers, was 5,697.
Yeah, and earlier in the week, people were saying, hot tip, Galloway might win the by-election. Galloway might win the by-election.
Yeah, and that's
he hasn't won the by-election. He's absolutely trashed the
That is not a narrow victory. And I don't think anyone could reasonably claim that. But I do think if Labour had a serious candidate who they had backed and who hadn't been embroiled in the controversy that he had been, that they would win the seat. And I think they will win the seat back at the election, general election.
I don't. But anyway, on this one-off point, yes, there's only one Galloway and there's only this by-election in Rochdale. I understand, one-off in that sense. But it comes in a context where our politics, many people are saying, have been transformed by what's happened with the attack on Israel and the attack on Gaza to root out Hamas. Now, that's what makes it not unique. the issues that resonated in this by-election, we suppose, by the way, Tom Harwood was saying earlier that the turnout was very high in those wards where there was a big Muslim population. The issues and the divisions that have manifested themselves in this by-election, they surely do apply more widely, don't they?
Well, I think the truth is quite possibly, we don't know. And that is a sort of really interesting question going into the general election. That will be the test case. We haven't seen yet a massive sample size. We have one constituency here where it's been a big issue. If in constituencies where there are significant Muslim populations, this result is, or this feeling is replicated, that will be it'll be very interesting to see whether this becomes a big issue at the general election. Because the obvious thing to say is, well, at a general election, what will people think about? They'll think about the cost of living, they'll think about the NHS, they'll think about, all of those issues on which people typically make decisions.
Just pause for a moment. Yeah. I just want to bring viewers and listeners the interview that George Galloway gave to us exclusively a little earlier. He was speaking to our political correspondent, Catherine Forster.
I think the revival of the civic spirit in the town is vital, and unity is important for that. But it wasn't me that dragged Rochdale's name in the dirt. It was Labour, first in covering up the grooming scandal, and secondly in imploding with anti-Semitic comments made by the Labour candidate. We were trending for 2 full days that week, and it wasn't in a good way, and it wasn't about me. So divisive is not really a charge, I think, that can be laid against me. I've just won a thumping majority in a by-election.
You have. It's Sir Keir Starmer is calling for a ceasefire now. Biden is hopeful it will happen. Are you? And would you lay off him in that instant? It doesn't seem like there's any prospect of you laying off Keir Starmer.
Or any prospect of them actually genuinely seeking an end to the war in Gaza. I've been saying that anyone who believes Keir Starmer is trying to end the war in Gaza, I've got a bridge in London, I could sell them going cheap. It is a totally unbelievable pretense. If he really did, he would have backed the SNP motion in Parliament, or at least not tried to wreck it, which is what he did. And he tried to wreck it because what he is asking for is a different thing to what the SNP were asking for. And what the SNP were asking for was a genuine ceasefire.
And just finally, it sounds like you've got big plans for this new party of yours. Do you hope to replicate this in seats across the country and in other constituencies come the election?
Yeah, especially in this region. I don't know what will happen elsewhere in the country, but I have now received deputations from Bolton, from Oldham, from Blackburn, from Bury, and from Tameside in Greater Manchester, and that's just the deputations I've received. We've got 59 parliamentary candidates ready to go, and we'll stand in, therefore, 70 Labour seats, and either defeat them ourselves or cause their defeat. And there will be independents, not Workers' Party, but independents that we're ready to support, who will stand up and down the country, and I know of many already in the field who will now be energised by the result here tonight. I think Keir Starmer's woken up this morning to his worst nightmare.
Well, what do we think about that? George Galloway speaking a little earlier to our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Obviously very, very confident and full of it.
As always.
Yeah, and Michael said he thinks he will still romp home a general election.
Win, I said, yes.
OK, win. OK, maybe by a smaller majority then. What he didn't do, though, is campaign on local issues here. And surely local issues will play a massive part in a general election.
I think they will. And I also think in a general election, people will be thinking much more about who they want to form the next government. And that's why I think Labour will win whenever there is a general election this year, because people will be voting, or more people will be thinking about who do they want to be the Prime Minister, who do they want to form the government, and ultimately that's not going to be George Galloway and his Workers' Party. So I do think Labour will come back for this. I think it's not a great night for them, but I don't think it's a disaster, and I don't think anyone painting it as a disaster for the Labour Party is correct.
Well, Do you think your confidence will be shared within the Labour Party? I mean, there's such a thing as objective fact and another thing which is panic. And parties are very given to panic. Do you think that Sir Keir Starmer will come under pressure now to change his position on the ceasefire question?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you're somebody who has been pressuring him to take a stronger stance on what's happening in Israel-Palestine, this is an opportunity for you to double down on Keir Starmer. So, yes, he will come under pressure. Obviously, when Labour... there was a new poll out this morning. Labour are 26 points ahead. The last thing that Keir Starmer or the leadership want to do is appear to be complacent. So, absolutely, they will be saying, you know, this isn't a great night. They put out a statement this morning saying they deeply regret the fact that they couldn't stand a proper candidate. But, you know, I think overall it's a question of Labour just...
Funnily enough, I think they've been quite lucky that they didn't have a candidate, because, you know, if they did have a candidate and they've been beaten by Galloway, that would be even worse.
Well, that's absolutely true.
But that is counterfactual analysis. That isn't actually what happened. By the way, on the local issues question, he did say quite a lot about local issues, and he's pledged in his victory speech that he's now going to go after the Labour councillors. He's going to try and drive them out of office in the local elections, and he's campaigning on the survival of the Rochdale Football Club, which is an issue on which I'm not well briefed.
But he did say, when he was campaigning, this is a referendum on Gaza. The local issues were very much secondary. And at a time when everything is so febrile at the moment, it is so divided, George Galloway becoming an MP is just going to make this even worse, isn't it, than it already is?
He is a very divisive figure, and he has always thrived on exploiting division in that respect.
I mean, already the campaign against anti-Semitism have come out this morning saying that they are extremely concerned following his victory.
Yeah, and of course this gives him a huge platform. He's going to have a maiden speech to make in the House of Commons. He's going to have that platform. He will be more in demand on television and radio, and that's exactly what he wanted. You know, does George Galloway care about people of Rochdale?
Well,
I'm not sure.
Steady on. But did you see how smoothly he told Catherine Forster, I'm not the divisive candidate? Amazing.
Well, of course he did. Of course he did. The reality, though...
Excuse me.
Could be somewhat different. Well, Andy Williams, political commentator, thank you very much
Andy.
for the moment. What we are going to do next is, I think, bring you the latest headlines at 6:38. It's rather a busy morning. You are with Breakfast on GB News with Pip Thompson and Michael Portillo. Here is a reminder of our top stories.
This is for Gaza.
Yep, George Galloway wins the Rochdale by-election in a landslide victory with almost 40% of the vote, following a controversial campaign, to put it mildly.
To remove...
George Galloway faced backlash within seconds of his victory. Surprisingly, not about Gaza, but his apparent climate change denial. And here is George Galloway's stark message for the Labour leader.
I think Keir Starmer's woken up this morning to his worst nightmare.
And that is as Nigel Farage warned about sectarian politics in the United Kingdom.
This is it. Sectarian politics is here to stay. People thought the result in 2012 in Bradford West was a complete one-off. It wasn't. It was a warning shot. This is voting along religious lines, allied to some extreme hard-left characters like the Chris Williamsons. No, this is real.
Also this morning, the government's flagship Rwanda policy could end up costing more than £600 million to deport 300 refugees, according to a spending watchdog.
Beautiful gardens, eternal flowers. You know the way, so take me there. Won't you make me dizzy?
Ollie Alexander releases his Eurovision 2024 entry Dizzy, with the music video coming out later this morning.
And a very happy St David's Day to everyone celebrating in Wales and, of course, across the country.
Claire Pearsall and Nigel Nelson will be taking us through what's leading the news today. This is Breakfast on GB News with Pip and Michael.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
Are you across this microaggression story?
I'm across microaggressions. I'm also across XL bullies.
You would not last 5 minutes.
Oh, for God's
So
sake,
basic-
civil servants, give me strength.
So civil servants have been taught not to roll their eyes. Something you do very well. We both do it quite a lot, actually.
Because it's seen as an act of microaggression. This, by the way, this costs the taxpayer, this training, £160,000. What the hell is going on in our woke civil service? Who cares if someone rolls their eyes in exasperation?
What the hell is going on in our civil service, full stop, if the way that civil servants are communicating with each other is rolling their eyes and looking at their phones? I mean, is the government being run by people who are essentially acting to each other like stroppy teenagers?
Yeah.
But I'm all right with people, because, you see, I would be in defence of eye rolling.
So me too, I couldn't care less.
But do you know why? Because I want people to give me their genuine reaction, as long as it's not deeply offensive. But I want to know how people feel. And what they're being told here, civil servants are being taught, and of course this is an area of employment law, because people are taking cases against their bosses who roll their eyes at them. They're saying they're being encouraged to say nothing and nod their heads to promote transparency and inclusion. Don't show what you really think, just nod your head.
But I think that comes with then saying what you really think, and this is the key problem, and what these courses are trying to establish. And I looked into some of them when I was researching this, and it's not saying hide what you're feeling. It's saying, rather than huffing and puffing and rolling your eyes, if you've got a disagreement with someone, say I've got a disagreement with someone. Because otherwise, you can't have an effective workplace if people are sort of just passively, aggressively huffing at each other.
Why do these civil servants need to be taught this? Why do people need to be taught this? This is just normal discourse in a normal working day. You don't need a seminar on it.
Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Pip Thompson and Michael Portillo. And we are wishing all of you a happy St David's Day today.
Not just in Wales, people celebrate St David's Day high and low, I've no doubt. Now, joining us to go through what's making the news is GB News senior political correspondent Nigel Nelson and former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall. Nigel, normally we sort of pick our way through piles of newspapers, but I have a feeling we're still on the by-election, which, of course, is not in the newspapers. So a series of people have been through the studio already, giving their views as to the broad significance or lack of significance of the by-election. What is your own analysis on that point?
That had there been a proper Labour candidate standing, this would have been hugely significant. As there wasn't, it isn't. I think that the whole thing was a weird by-election, and we've ended up with a pretty weird result at the end of it. There will be Labour MPs who will be looking at their own Muslim voters, especially in seats where the Muslim vote's really important, and wondering if they may end up losing votes. But as a kind of national significance, no.
So it's not Keir Starmer's worst nightmare as far as you're concerned?
Well, no, I can't see why it is. I mean, I know that George Galloway is threatening to put up sort of 59 candidates around the place. First of all, let's see who those candidates are and whether he actually manages to get them. We haven't got long before the election to actually arrange that. So I think that what it shows is that Gaza is an important issue, and an important issue to a large number of voters. When it comes to the general election, we'll be back to cost of living, we'll be back to the NHS and things like that. So I don't see it as being some major kind of sea change in British politics.
Nigel, I'm sure that you have always been very wise on this issue, but other political commentators during the course of last week were saying, do you know, many voters in Rochdale have not even realised that the Labour candidate has been disowned. As far as they're concerned, it's business as usual. His name will appear on the ballot paper as the Labour candidate, so his vote is going to hold up. And then I remember on Sunday on my programme, a commentator came on and said, as though it was a sort of, completely original thought, I think George Galloway might win the by-election. Now, we have moved some distance from those views, which were being held by perfectly respectable analysts. So it's all very well for you to say, oh, well, you know, George Galloway's one where there wasn't a Labour candidate. Many political commentators, if they're being honest with themselves, are astonished by this.
Yeah, I mean, I think we began to see towards the end of the middle of this week, really, that George Galloway might win. Might win. Might win. Certainly the bookies were actually...
Might win. He received just under 40% of the vote at the end.
Well, I mean, he did very well. There's no question with a kind of majority like that, that's really good. I don't believe, for instance, the people of Rochdale didn't know that the Labour candidate was no longer really the Labour candidate. And the other interesting thing is it's the independent Dave Tully who came second, and he was campaigning on very local issues. So people who couldn't actually vote for a candidate from one of the main parties then turned to him.
Yeah, David Tully secured more than 6,600.
Well, exactly, and came second. I mean, that's significant. So what it shows is that if people didn't have a vote for one of the mainstream candidates, and certainly they didn't in the case of Labour, which you'd have expected to win this by-election, they moved on to the local candidate who actually campaigned on local issues. It was about his maternity ward in his local hospital. It was about his hospice needing more support. It was about speeding drivers. Very much local issues.
OK.
Just one moment, by the way, to say that the by-election is a fantastic British institution. I mean, it gives the opportunity for people in a particular locality to do what nobody expects them to do and really to put the cat amongst the pigeons, doesn't it? It is an extraordinary institution. And because by-elections are so disruptive, you'd think that parties might take more care about causing by-elections. Now, this one, of course, was caused by the sad death of Tony Lloyd. But so many by-elections are caused by the, well, frankly, the poor behaviour of the Member of Parliament.
Yeah, that's right.
Who's left the House. And you think that of all the things that parties would want to do, it would be to avoid by-elections.
Yeah, and you can see you can see the breakdown of discipline in political parties at the moment. The fact we're having so many by-elections.
Yes.
We might even have a load more before we actually get to the general election. But at the moment, British politics is in a pretty dire state. So we've seen that sort of the farce of the vote over Gaza last week. I thought that Prime Minister's questions was absolutely appalling.
Yes.
The behaviour of both Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak.
And a speaker who didn't dare to intervene.
And the speaker who didn't intervene. But the whole thing there is you're suddenly polarising it exactly where we don't need to be, with this idea that the Tories are all Islamophobes, which they're not, and Labour is anti-Semitic, which it's not. But that's the kind of language that both leaders were using to try and give that impression.
Claire, let's bring you in.
Indeed.
Was it a night of just complete weirdness, as Nigel suggests?
I mean, we all love a by-election. Those of us in the political sphere always look at these by-elections with the slight sense of trepidation or amusement, depending on which side you're on. And I think it's important. This was a particularly different kind of by-election. Sad death of Tony Lloyd, the complete implosion of the Labour Party in choosing a candidate who wasn't suitable for many reasons. But I think Nigel's right. Actually, the more interesting story out of all of this is the independent candidate, David Tully, in second place. And I think that local issues have a massive importance to people, especially in by-elections. And it's sort of, they weren't interested in the Conservative candidate, they weren't interested in a Reform candidate or any of the other sort of smaller parties.
Did you see me?
Boy did good.
Did you see me trying to look sceptically?
Yes, I absolutely did, and it made me laugh.
Because first of all, I can't see anything amusing about this by-election for anyone other than George Galloway. I mean, don't tell me the Conservative Party is going to be amused by this
No, absolutely not. I mean, you look on it as if it's in its own little bubble. It's a by-election which is removed from what is happening. It is on one particular issue, which has galvanised the likes of George Galloway.
Which is the issue?
He is going to... that is the issue of Gaza and Israel.
So although Dave Tully's performance is very remarkable, that is not actually the readout from this by-election.
But he is going to grow that kind of support. If anybody thinks that George Galloway is still going to be in post come a general election, I think that we will not see that. I really don't. I think that The people of Rochdale, I think, are getting a really rum deal out of this. I feel incredibly sorry for the majority of them. It was a relatively good turnout for
Can we ask you
by-election.
the genie back in the bottle question, if you understand me? Our politics are in a different place at the moment. Do you think that we're going to get this genie back into the bottle?
You see, now that is a really tricky one because it doesn't feel like it.
Yes.
It is incredibly volatile, it is toxic, and these issues are getting completely out of hand. Neither party, neither major party, either the Conservatives or Labour, have got a handle on how they want to present themselves, on what they believe is the issue they need to be fighting on, and they are letting it boil over.
And this is the way in which the by-election is not amusing for any of the main political parties.
No.
Because they are very worried that the election of George Galloway is another chapter in the division of British politics.
And they're not wrong, and they have brought this upon themselves. They have allowed this person to come through. They have. If you look at Labour and their candidate, they chose a candidate who had a history of making inappropriate remarks as a councillor. He was well known to them. None of this should have come as any surprise. If you do your due diligence properly, you would have picked that up. I think they were hoping that the name attached to the Labour badge.
Well, he was a former
be
advisor, wasn't he? As
he
well?
was. He was advising Corbyn at one point. So he had ties in with Corbyn. Completely then changed that round to support the new leader, as most people would do with a political party. You support the leader that you have. But his comments are well known. He has sat on a local council. It is not as if his comments have come out of thin air. They have been recorded, and they should have been big flags being flown at the adoption of this candidate.
What we're not going to see, are we, as we do normally with by-elections, is translating it into the national picture.
No, absolutely not.
If this was a general election, what would happen?
Well, not in the sense of the votes, but let's try Nigel on this. What is your reaction to the sort of Farage point that, you know, that politics has changed, that this is very unfortunate, and that this by-election is another symptom of that change?
I think we actually have that clip with Nigel Farage, GB News presenter. Let's hear what he said about that.
George is enormously powerful, very charismatic, and even though I disagree with him profoundly on things, on a one-to-one basis, I struggle not to like him. But I'm afraid he is now using that power, that ability, that personality in a way that will divide our country horrendously.
What do you think, Nigel?
Well, I mean, we come back to what the actual significance of it. This is not the first time George Galloway has claimed that this by-election is a landmark event. He's claimed other by-elections he's won as being a landmark event. I mean, yes, at the moment we've got a polarised politics, and two political parties who are not handling it terribly well. But there's also a kind of hysteria going on. For instance, taking things like MP safety. Now, people talk about how this is the unsafest time for MPs there's ever been. I mean, you'll remember the IRA days, but in those days that MPs were targeted by professionals who knew exactly how to kill them. They lived with it every single day.
I came into Parliament because my predecessor was murdered by the IRA.
Exactly. So you know, there have been more dangerous times that we've lived through. So at the moment, Gaza is certainly dividing communities. Emotions are running high, but when you get to the general election, I think we will be thinking about more important, but more domestic issues.
Don't you think emotions will be running even higher than they are now?
Well, I mean, one would hope that by the time the election comes, we will have a ceasefire in Gaza. I mean, I know they're only sort of tiptoeing towards it, but there is just a chance that something like that would happen.
But members of Parliament, this was demonstrated last week in the chaos in the House of Commons. There are many members of Parliament who feel that they're going to be intimidated because of the way they have voted, or in order to make them vote differently in the future. And I do think that is quite likely to be a feature of the general election.
And how will it affect their campaigning on the doorsteps?
Well, I mean, all candidates want to be on the doorstep, all candidates want to hold public meetings, all candidates want to be up close with the public. And all of that is, I'm afraid, somewhat cast in doubt, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean certainly I think that clearly there's intimidation going on, but also you just have to look at this vote. 30% of the voters in Rochdale are Muslim. A Labour MP sitting on a majority which relies on the Muslim vote will be worried.
Well, Nigel Nelson and Claire Pearsall, thank you very much indeed. I think we're going to be pursuing this subject further as we go on.
Yes.
But it is now time to see what's going on in the weather. There is another story. It is the weather. Annie Shuttleworth has it.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning and welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie, from the Met Office. Some heavy rain will push into southwestern areas through the rest of the day. There's also a risk of some sleet and snow over the hills. But the heaviest rain will push from the southwest, affecting southwestern areas of England and parts of South Wales. That's where there's a weather warning in force throughout today. But this band of rain will push into more northern areas of England. That will fall as snow over the high ground above around 250 metres mainly. So lower levels will mainly just see rain. But we also see some quite blustery showers following in behind that across many southern and central areas, and it's going to be feeling rather chilly out there today, particularly on any coastal areas and in any showers where we've got quite a strong wind. Through tonight, it's going to be staying quite unsettled. Many areas will see further rain. That band will push into more northern areas, into parts of Scotland where it could bring a further risk of some sleet and snow, potentially some ice on the roads. It's going to be a frostier start where we do see any clear skies developing to Saturday morning, but much of the rain will be restricted to eastern areas throughout the morning on Saturday, particularly across northeastern areas of England. That's where we could see some further snow falling over the high ground. Further south, it should be a little bit drier through the morning, but there will be some showers pushing in across coastal areas by the afternoon. These bring a risk of some hail and some heavy downpours, and it will still feel chilly once again on Saturday. It does look a little bit drier and brighter on Sunday though. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
We had Grant Shapps on last week. He was talking about how defence spending is now creeping up to 2.25% of GDP. Ben Wallace's predecessor suggested it should be 3%. We hear that we've got the smallest army, I think, since the Napoleonic Wars. Numbers are down. There's a question as to whether we can staff frigates in the Red Sea. Why haven't we sent aircraft carriers? What's your impression of the situation?
Well, I don't think it matters how much you spend, it's how effectively you spend it. And we spend it very ineffectively. We have lots of scandals about defence spending. And I think partly because of the monopoly position of some of our defence suppliers, we don't get good value and we don't get reliability. This latest story in the Telegraph is that HMS Diamond, which is our ship, which is out there defending the Red Sea, doesn't have the capability of firing a missile from the ship to the land, so it can't participate in the attacks on the Houthis. So in order that we can participate in the attacks, we're flying RAF aircraft from Cyprus, which is a very long way away. When I was Defence Secretary, I ordered cruise missiles for our nuclear-powered, but not nuclear-armed submarines. And I think we have 6 or possibly 7 of those. But last autumn, it was reported that 5 of those were out of commission, were not available. We have about 21 aggressive surface ships. So we've got 2 aircraft carriers, then we've got frigates, and we've got destroyers. But at any one time, you can count on about half of those not being available because they're under refit or whatever. So we have a minimal surface fleet now. And for whatever reason, it doesn't seem that we're able to deploy a submarine to the area that can fire cruise missiles. Our 2 aircraft carriers, built at enormous expense, are sitting in Portsmouth.
Which seems to most people ludicrous,
well,
at least with what's going on.
It doesn't seem ludicrous to me.
Good morning. It is 7 o'clock on Friday, the 1st of March. Today.
This is for Gaza.
George Galloway is back in the House of Commons with a resounding win in the Rochdale by-election after a campaign in which the Gaza war was a running theme.
That's right, George Galloway is back in Parliament after a 9-year break as MP for Rochdale, and he says Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer will have a high price to pay for his stance on Gaza.
To remove a climate change denier, you said in for hustings that you wanted to extract oil and gas from the North Sea.
George Galloway won by nearly 6,000 more votes than any other candidate, but he faced backlash within seconds of his victory. And here is his stark message for the Labour leader.
I think Keir Starmer's woken up this morning to his worst nightmare.
And that is as Nigel Farage warned about sectarian politics in the United Kingdom.
This is it. Sectarian politics is here to stay. People thought the result in 2012 in Bradford West was a complete one-off. It wasn't. It was a warning shot. This is voting along religious lines, allied to some extreme hard-left characters like the Chris Williamsons. No, this is real.
Also this morning, the government's flagship Rwanda policy could end up costing more than £600 million to deport 300 refugees. That's according to a spending watchdog.
Beautiful gardens, eternal flowers. You know the way, so take me there. Won't you make me dizzy?
Ollie Alexander releases his Eurovision 2024 entry Dizzy, with the music video due to be out later this morning.
And a very happy St David's Day to everyone celebrating in Wales and beyond.
Well, in the sport this morning, on the eve of the new Formula One season, Christian Horner saga rumbles on and on. Paul Pogba and his 4-year doping ban, and the World Indoor Athletics Championships gets underway today.
Good morning. It's a cold day out there for many areas, and there's some snow due for some. Find out all the details with me a little later on.
Good morning, I'm Pip Thompson.
Good morning, I'm Michael Portillo, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
And we were talking about our Eurovision entry being called Dizzy. Well, I think a lot of us are a bit dizzy this morning after this by-election result. Plenty of views coming in from you as well. Thank you so much. Michael, what have we got there?
David says this is a sad day for politics when the electorate has voted solely on the ground of what's going on in Gaza rather than the needs of the Rochdale community.
And Tina, good morning. Why are these politicians deluded that speaking about a ceasefire in another part of the world is really going to make them stop fighting? This should not be a problem for by-elections.
And a sartorial point here. Adrian says, George Galloway is a good orator. He puts it across really well. He needs to hoover the dust off his hat, though.
I thought you'd be more interested in listening to what he was saying rather than the dust on his hat. We've also had lots of you welcoming Michael Portillo onto breakfast.
Oh, that's very sweet of them.
Which is lovely. And also, I'm so sorry, I didn't get this gentleman's name, but somebody suggested, because you had a little cough a few minutes ago.
Yes.
Someone said, get Michael a glass of grapefruit juice. It's an old radio station trick, sorts the cough out and the vocal cords.
I will try that. I'm back tomorrow, so I'll try it for tomorrow.
OK, so let's bring you the breaking news overnight this morning, and that is that George Galloway of the Workers' Party of Britain has won one of the most divisive and controversial by-election contests in recent history.
Turnout at the by-election was 39.7%, which was higher than expected. This was Galloway's message to Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer.
Keir Starmer, this is for Gaza. You have paid and you will pay a high price for the role that you have played in enabling, encouraging and covering for the catastrophe presently going on in occupied Palestine in the Gaza Strip.
That was George Galloway a little earlier. Joining us now is our political editor, Christopher Hope, who has been following the by-election in Rochdale. Good morning to you, Christopher. It was quite extraordinary. Others are calling it weird. What's your analysis, Chris?
Yeah, it is a weird one, isn't it? When you see both those two main parties knocked down, the Tory party in third place, Labour's, well, notional candidate, the candidate, of course, was disowned by the Labour Party because, of course, remarks emerged after all the ballot papers were printed as Ali came forth. I was struck by, I mean, George Galloway is an orator. He said in other remarks overnight that Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak are two cheeks of the same backside, and they both got well and truly spanked tonight here in Rochdale. I think that is pretty much true. The only worst result really was for the Reform Party, Simon Danchuk, former Labour MP for Rochdale, who came a distant 6th on fewer than 2,000 votes. They're claiming they were unfairly treated by vote during the campaign and the rest, but it's definitely an unusual by-election here. Michael might like this bit of history that George Galloway is claiming he is now the same as Churchill, in that he has stood represented as an MP for 4 different towns and cities. So he sees himself with a place in history. Whether Churchill would like to be compared with Galloway is a different question, Michael.
Christopher, what was the balance, in your view, in the campaigning between local issues and Gaza? In his acceptance speech, there were references to local issues, quite a few references, but does that misrepresent the campaign? Was the campaign fundamentally about Gaza?
Well, it's made that way because George Galloway focused on the Muslim community here, who are very exercised about the Gaza issue. But it was an odd campaign in the sense that the person who came second, David Tully, an independent, a season ticket holder at Rochdale FC, under threat at the moment, as many small football clubs are. He campaigned on a new maternity wing for services here in his local hospital. So while there was a hyper-local candidate who came second, there was a kind of internationalist candidate who came first, and as our viewers are writing in this morning saying, why on earth are they saying this is for Gaza, as George Galloway did, his first line as MP for Rochdale was saying that. He should say, this is for Rochdale, I want to help the people of Rochdale with their issues. George Galloway did make reference to the issues of the local football club and the rest when he did become the MP, won the by-election, but I think it's all the other stuff, the national picture, the stuff we worry about with taxation and Labour and that was all pushed aside as these independent candidates went after each other. I should say, by the way, that George Galloway is now saying his Workers' Party of Britain will stand 59 candidates at the election, probably focusing on other areas with large Muslim communities, which could prove a bit of a headache for Keir Starmer.
May I just ask you, Tom Harwood, who was watching the ballot boxes arrive at the count, doing his political analysis, he thought that the wards in Rochdale, which had a particularly strong representation of Muslim voters, had turned out strongly. Is Tom right on that, do you think?
Yes, I mean, he was at the count along with my colleague Catherine Forster. I think that probably is. Anecdotally, we were told that was right, and that's why you may have this rather higher turnout, 39% than we thought. Often these by-elections can be a lot less, particularly so near to a general election, likely this November, I would expect. So I think yes, that makes sense. I think because in the normal run of things, the turnout is much lower than that.
OK, political editor Christopher Hope, thank you very much for your thoughts this morning. So if you are just waking up, George Galloway is an MP again. And this is what he had to say about it.
I think the revival of the civic spirit in the town is vital, and unity is important for that. But it wasn't me that dragged Rochdale's name in the dirt. It was Labour, first in covering up the grooming scandal, and secondly in imploding with anti-Semitic comments made by the Labour candidate. We were trending for 2 full days that week, and it wasn't in a good way, and it wasn't about me. So divisive is not really a charge, I think, that can be laid against me. I've just won a thumping majority in a by-election.
You have. It's Sir Keir Starmer is calling for a ceasefire now. Biden is hopeful it will happen. Are you? And would you lay off him in that instant? It doesn't seem like there's any prospect of you laying off Keir Starmer.
Or any prospect of them actually genuinely seeking an end to the war in Gaza. I've been saying that anyone who believes Keir Starmer is trying to end the war in Gaza, I've got a bridge in London I could sell them going cheap. It is a totally unbelievable pretense. If he really did, he would have backed the SNP motion in Parliament, or at least not tried to wreck it, which is what he did. And he tried to wreck it because what he is asking for is a different thing to what the SNP were asking for. And what the SNP were asking for was a genuine ceasefire.
And just finally, it sounds like you've got big plans for this new party of yours. Do you hope to replicate this in seats across the country and in other constituencies come the election?
Yeah, especially in this region. I don't know what will happen elsewhere in the country, but I have now received deputations from Bolton, from Oldham, from Blackburn, from Bury, and from Tameside in Greater Manchester, and that's just the deputations I've received. We've got 59 parliamentary candidates ready to go, and we'll stand in, therefore, 70 Labour seats, and either defeat them ourselves or cause their defeat. And there will be independents, not Workers' Party, but independents that we're ready to support, who will stand up and down the country, and I know of many already in the field who will now be energised by the result here tonight. I think Keir Starmer's woken up this morning to his worst nightmare.
Has he? Well, we're going to ask that question. Joining us now is former Special Advisor Charlie Rowley here in the studio and Labour commentator James Matthewson. A very good morning to you both. James, what about George Galloway's comment there that he is Keir Starmer's worst nightmare?
I can't speak for Keir Starmer, but he's my worst nightmare, purely just in the interest of following politics. And we're going to have to listen to George Galloway now in the House of Commons, and there's going to be many laborious lectures and lots of speeches where he talks about himself, because ultimately, this is what it's about for George Galloway. It's all about him. It's the George Galloway show. You know, don't be confused with him talking about Gaza, with him talking about anything. This is about revenge against the Labour Party. It's been a long time coming for George Galloway. Even just the way he's talking there, he thinks he's going to sweep the Labour Party away at the next general election. This is a very unique set of circumstances where the Labour Party has basically vacated the seat because of a huge mess up and cock up there on their part. And George Galloway has been the opportunist, has seized the opportunity as he does. And he's in, you know, and fair play to him for doing that. But this is no bigger sign of him talking about tectonic plate shifting. I don't think anybody in the Labour Party would be concerned other than the fact that they're going to have to see George Galloway every week in the House of Commons.
James, you are not, I think, a Labour Party candidate in Scotland hoping to win one of the maybe 25 or 30 seats that Labour could win back from the SNP. But if you were such a person, might you not feel rather concerned? I mean, even in those remarks that George Galloway made now, he pointed out that it's perfectly clear that the SNP position is different from the Labour position on the question of the ceasefire. This was all rehearsed in the chaos in the House of Commons last week. And isn't Galloway pointing out that these distinctions matter amongst Muslim voters and possibly other voters on the left of British politics?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think, you know, a lot of people don't think about this in this scope until it is presented to them in such a way. And the danger is, obviously, people like George Galloway with a platform to be able to say that it matters and to drive that wedge. Because George Galloway, as I've said, is intent on the destruction of the Labour Party because it's a personal grievance. He's got an axe to grind. So he will just try and stop Labour candidates from winning. It doesn't matter to him whether the SNP win those seats, whether the Tories win those seats. I mean, you've got a Tory government. Think about Rochdale, what it suffered under austerity. And not a word has come out of that man's mouth about that. What he's talked about in his first few words of a victory speech is Keir Starmer. He's obsessed. It's a personal grievance. But I think up here in Scotland, you're absolutely right. Places like that, where that wedge issue can be driven, it could stop the Labour Party from winning seats, you know, out of spite. But this is nothing new in the Labour Party. The Labour Party knows the hard left has always rather than take the fight to our opposition, would rather have a scrap internally and rather, stop Labour candidates from winning. That's always been a point of heartbreak for us on the centre-left of politics.
Actually, George Galloway, in his 7-minute speech, did refer to the plight of Rochdale. He said it had once been one of the great cities in England and that it had been reduced to sort of penury. But shall we bring in Charlie Rowley? I put it to you that there's not much consolation here for any of the main parties, including the Conservative Party. I think Jacob Rees-Mogg has already talked about his worries about what this indicates about the divisions in British politics. Nigel Farage, who of course is not a Conservative but a GB News presenter, as is Jacob Rees-Mogg, has also talked about this being a symptom of the division of politics. Isn't that what many people will be worried about this morning?
I think that's right. And I think that's why you see the emergence of people like George Galloway. That's why you see the emergence of reform. I think when there is division within the country, when it comes to political ideology, people do go to the extremes when people feel the need to, and particularly in by-elections. But I do think when it comes to the general election, and the choice is clear between, Rishi Sunak or Sir Keir Starmer, that is ultimately going to be the ones occupying number 10. The choice will be very clear, I think. George Galloway won't be holding on to that seat, even though it is an absolutely cataclysmic disaster for the Labour Party today, waking up, if you're Sir Keir Starmer, losing what should be a rock-solid Labour stronghold seat. It was an embarrassing and excruciating performance by the Labour Party, from its selection, from its standing by the candidate, to then not being able to ditch him for anti-Semitic comments, to then having to have him on the ballot paper, and then losing to George Galloway, as James was saying there, is highly, highly embarrassing. But you're right. When it comes to division in politics, people do look to the extremes, particularly in by-elections, particularly in we're not midterms in terms of election cycle, but just midterms in terms of government performance. But when it comes to the general election, the choice will be very clear, and the public will have a clear choice.
Do you really think that? Because people seem so dissatisfied with the parties at Westminster that they want that alternative. And people like, well, you are playing down George Galloway's victory here, but he won by nearly 6,000 votes. And as Michael said earlier, last week, people were saying, oh, he might win, he's a bit of an outsider.
More votes than the Labour, Conservative and Lib Dems put together.
Well, no, quite. No, I never thought I'd say this, but I agree with George Galloway. It was a thumping victory against what is a strong Labour stronghold. So the Labour Party should be worried this morning, just as the Conservative Party, I'm sure does have a few jitters over reform, because if you vote for reform, the Tories will say that's when you end up with Labour. But obviously, if you end up, if you vote for George Galloway, you can lose a Labour potential of a Labour government if that's what you want. So the extremes and the fringe parties that are picking up support should be a worry to political pundits and parties. But when it comes to... So that's why both, I think, will have to frame the choice of the debate very clearly when it comes to the general election.
James, do you mind if I just switch to James?
Of course.
James, can I put a sort of very broad point to you? One possible explanation for why George Galloway has won this by-election is it could be that people are fed up with politicians who say effectively nothing. They have no ideas, they have no convictions, they have no consistency, and suddenly they come across a man, Galloway, who has a view on something. OK, it's Gaza, it's not mainstream British politics, but could that be part of the explanation, that people are yearning to vote for someone who's got something to say?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Michael. I mean, I think it does come down to, there are at times of peril and distress, which, make no mistake, everybody I know, people who are not normally politically aware or active, are talking about Gaza. They're talking about this. So whatever you think, wherever you sit on the debate, it's had cut through, and it's stuck with a lot of people, and it's moved a lot of people. So when you face issues like that, when people appear with strong answers and clear solutions, the desire to get behind them and support that is strong. And I think that's the case with George Galloway. That's how he's made his political career to date. I do think, however, going forward, to see the traction stick, would be very difficult, because the nature, and believe you me, I've seen this a million times myself, coming from the left of the Labour Party and the traditions that I've come from, the trade union movement, it will eat itself. And you know, they won't be able to agree, they won't be able to organise, and this always happens time and time again. It happened with the Northern Independence Party, do you remember them? When they popped up for a little bit, so, you know, they were trying to organise, and it all comes down to the egos on the left, the disputes about tiny, minuscule differences, who's a Trotskyite as opposed to a Stalinist and all the rest of it. You know, so it's nothing new, but I think it will struggle to move forward and to stick in the general election. And I think, to be honest, whilst I would say there's a silver lining in this, because the Labour Party will have the chance to give George Galloway a thumping defeat in the future as well.
OK, fantastic. We're very grateful to James Matheson and Charlie Rowley.
When you mention there, no ideas, no consistency from politicians today, do you think that's very different to how it was when you were...
Indeed. Well, a part of the time when I was in government, the part when I was under Margaret Thatcher, you could never have accused the leader of having no thoughts, no ideas, no ideology and no consistency. At other periods of Conservative government, you could have made that case more strongly.
OK. Shall I ask you which periods those were, Michael Portillo?
The ones that followed.
OK, we need to bring you a weather forecast. It's almost the weekend. It is St David's Day. Is the sun going to be shining? Here's Annie Shuttleworth.
Hello, good morning and welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie, from the Met Office. Some heavy rain will push into southwestern areas through the rest of the day. There's also a risk of some sleet and snow over the hills. But the heaviest rain will push from the southwest, affecting southwestern areas of England and parts of South Wales. That's where there's a weather warning in force throughout today. But this band of rain will push into more northern areas of England. That will fall as snow over the high ground above around 250 metres mainly. So lower levels will mainly just see rain. But we also see some quite blustery showers following in behind that across many southern and central areas, and it's going to be feeling rather chilly out there today, particularly on any coastal areas and in any showers where we've got quite a strong wind. Through tonight, it's going to be staying quite unsettled. Many areas will see further rain. That band will push into more northern areas, into parts of Scotland where it could bring a further risk of some sleet and snow, potentially some ice on the roads. It's going to be a frostier start where we do see any clear skies developing to Saturday morning, but much of the rain will be restricted to eastern areas throughout the morning on Saturday, particularly across northeastern areas of England. That's where we could see some further snow falling over the high ground. Further south, it should be a little bit drier through the morning, but there will be some showers pushing in across coastal areas by the afternoon. These bring a risk of some hail and some heavy downpours, and it will still feel chilly once again on Saturday. It does look a little bit drier and brighter on Sunday, though. Bye-bye.
Annie, thank you. Well, still to come, more political analysis on the Rochdale by-election. Plus, there's plenty of other news. We're bringing you the sport very shortly, and we know that the Red Bull team principal, Christian Horner, well, he's been mired in a lot of controversy, and he has been forced to deny some more allegations today. Paul Coit will be giving us those details very shortly. This is Breakfast on GB News. Good morning, with Pip Thompson and Michael Portillo.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens with our team of dedicated journalists across the UK. We're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Lee Anderson's Real World. Fridays from 7 p.m.
Dr. Jane Jones, who's the clinical lead for Care After Combat. Yep. Jane, thanks for coming. And just tell me a little bit about your organisation. What do you do?
OK, well, thank you for having me here so we can talk about Care After Combat. So we are an organisation, a charity, who work into the prison system, working with military veterans who've somehow got involved with the justice system and
So there's quite a high population of ex-servicemen and women in our prisons. Why is that, do you think?
So 2014, the government did a review of who was resident in UK prisons, and what they found were that military veterans are the highest occupational group, and this obviously raises some concerns. So the government wanted to do something about that, and so they supported Care After Combat initially just as a scoping exercise, really, to see if there was any way we could help these men and women actually, you know, understand the problems that led to offending behaviour and go on to lead successful lives.
So what sort of offending behaviour are we talking typically for people that's in prison that's actually served in our armed forces?
Primarily, it's violence.
Yeah.
So that is the highest offence that we work with.
Okay.
But of course, the military, as with everybody else, it's the full range of offending behaviour.
OK, so we're in a pub, Jane, Dr. Jane, and I guess for some people, you know, the odd tip of alcohol is good, a bit of fun of a weekend, relax, let your hair down. But for some people, alcohol is not always their best friend, and I guess that plays a part in some of your veterans that end up inside.
Absolutely. So, speaking from my own experience, a good 2/3 of the people I work with have some kind of mental health problem or mental health difficulty, struggling to either adapt into civilian life or with some of the traumas they've experienced during service. People might self-medicate with alcohol to manage some of those thoughts and feelings.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Watching and listening to Breakfast with Pip Thompson and Michael Portillo.
Well, a reminder of our top story. Controversial left-wing firebrand George Galloway has won the Rochdale by-election emphatically. The former Labour MP, who is standing for the Workers' Party of Britain, won 12,335 votes, a majority of 5,697. He got as many votes, or rather more, than the Conservative, Liberal Democrat and former Labour candidates together. And joining us now is political commentator Andy Williams. Welcome back into the studio.
Hi.
Forgive me, I'm getting slightly frustrated because a lot of people have come through the studio this morning and the line more or less is nothing to see here. You know, move on, nothing to see here. And I think, you know, the people of Rochdale, for a start, might be quite frustrated by that. They have delivered a momentous result and surely they are saying something and surely it has some consequences. So for everyone to say, oh, no, you know, don't worry, we just go back to business as usual once George Galloway has made his maiden speech, I think it's possibly a bit disrespectful to a part of the electorate that spoke last night.
Well, I wouldn't go as far as to say business as usual, nothing to see here, but what I would say is that George Galloway is a unique figure. You know, he's won 3 by-elections in 3 different constituencies in the last 14, 15 years. He's very charismatic. He has a very particular point of view and a very high profile. So I think if you had stood any other effectively, I know he has his Workers' Party, but effectively independent candidate in this constituency, standing on the same issue, I don't think they would have converted the support in the way that he did. I think this is a vote for George Galloway.
All right, so let's come to national politics. Do you or do you not think that this will lead one way or another to Sir Keir Starmer having a different phraseology on the question of the ceasefire?
He's certainly going to come under pressure to, excuse me, really clearly articulate his view. I think he's going to have to double down on what Labour's position is on Gaza, and it's been a really, to be honest, it's been a muddled position. It's had to evolve, and I think this is the sort of issue where Keir Starmer, you know, his inexperience as a politician really shows.
Momentum the left-wing pressure group, they've reacted this morning, saying that for Labour, the results are self-inflicted, and to avoid any more damaging repeats, Starmer should end the factional abuse of Labour's selection processes and stand up for an immediate, permanent ceasefire in Gaza.
Well, I mean, if you want to talk about factionalism, then Momentum know what they're talking about. I wouldn't listen to a single thing they have to say. Having said that, they obviously represent a particular view on the left of the Labour Party about the Israel-Palestine war, and there's no doubt that, look, what this definitely exposes that Labour is very divided on this issue. Lots of the national political discussion, debate over recent years has been about how divided the Conservative Party is, but we need to remember the Labour Party is very divided too. And I think I'd be extraordinarily surprised if Labour don't win the general election later this year by a massive majority, but as soon as they go into government, the division within Labour is going to be really exposed. And I think that's going to be a challenging thing for Keir Starmer to manage. And this result, actually, I think, is a microcosm of that division.
One of the reasons he's had, Keir Starmer, what you call a muddled position on this, is that he thinks he's going to be Prime Minister. And he doesn't think that the Prime Minister of Britain can have a position that can be interpreted by anyone in any way as being anti-Israeli. Now, I think what you're saying is quite significant. You think he's going to have to change the words that he uses about a ceasefire, and this could mean that the next Prime Minister of Britain has a strikingly new position on Israel. That's why this by-election could be significant.
I think so, because he's going to have to manage his party. And, you know, the reality of Keir Starmer is we forget he's a very inexperienced politician. He's only been in Parliament for 9 years. He's only been leader of the Labour Party for 4 years. He's not somebody who has great or deep expertise or even views, frankly, on foreign policy. And I think that is going to be a very, very challenging thing for him to manage, especially, and this is why it's really important for the Labour Party that they don't just win the general election, but win big. Because if they don't, you'll have the left of the Labour Party and people who are affiliated with groups like Momentum who are capable of driving Labour's position on issues just like this.
So could Sir Keir Starmer's tactic be the closer it gets to an election, the least you want to say, in a way? The least controversial things you say, the better.
That's Keir Starmer's entire strategy.
Not getting much more controversial than ceasefire in Gaza at the moment.
Absolutely, that's his whole strategy. You know, if Keir Starmer can avoid putting forward a position on anything remotely controversial, he absolutely will. There's that famous, you'll remember this, Michael, there's that famous quote from the run-up to the 97 election, which is that Tony Blair proceeded to the election as if he was carrying a priceless Ming glass along a marble floor or something like that. And that's exactly what Keir Starmer's trying to do, right? He's 26 points ahead in the polls. Keep it simple, no controversy. This is the sort of thing he needs, like a hole in the head.
And by the way, the contrast, the way that Starmer will take government probably at the end of this year, by comparison with the way that Tony Blair took government in 1997, you know, the country was yearning for Tony Blair. I don't think it's yearning for Sir Keir Starmer. I think that's another thing this by-election tells us.
Andy Williams, political commentator, thank you very much. For now, we have got plenty of sport coming up for you. Paul, is it Coyote? Is it Coyote?
Oh, don't start all that again. Honestly, this is going to go on. Please, Michael, just ignore her for when she says this. If we're talking about Ming vases, that could be Christian Horner's Ming vase, which is Red Bull Racing, which is slipping out of his hands on the eve of the new F1 season. We'll talk about that in a second.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, weekdays from 9 p.m.
Ken, do you find the Union flag, the Union Jack, divisive?
In some situation, but as Simon quite clearly stated, and I agree with everything that he says in regards that there's situation when people use it for ulterior motive to cause fear, alarm and distress. We saw that with the far right when they came up to saying protecting the Churchill statues and things of that nature. But largely, on the large whole, even I wave the St. George's flag on a sporting occasion. And I don't see anything wrong in raising the Union Jack or the St. George's flag, so long as the intention is correct. And as he says, Mr. Brockhurst, he served for the country, and he should have every right to be proud of what he's done and the way that he wants to display it.
All right, Simon, what do you make of this kind of, I would argue it as like student social media-based politics, where you get these pillocks from the Green Party or whatever saying, oh, it's divisive and I can't believe it. It will be legal in this country to do... Do those people need to get out more? I was on the streets of Stratford earlier on, an incredibly diverse place, speaking to a massive range of people right across different age demographics. I couldn't find a single sausage who said to me that they thought that this guy from the Green Party was right.
He obviously has absolutely no attention from anybody, and this is his way of finding attention. Both Ken and myself, we both agree that nobody should use any symbol of national identity to offend others deliberately, because that's just inflaming a situation. There's so much sensitivity around so many things today, and people do get offended by so much so quickly without any rhyme or reason.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Good morning, welcome back. You are watching and listening to Breakfast with Pip and Michael. Thank you for all your thoughts this morning. Lots of lovely ones coming in for you, Michael.
Oh, that's
Shall I
very
read?
kind.
I'll read them out without... I don't want to embarrass you.
I might blush.
Jacqueline says, a breath of fresh air to have Michael Portillo on Breakfast TV. Deborah, what a pleasure, Michael Portillo, and how nice do you look?
Oh, enough. Thank you very much indeed, though. It is a great pleasure to be on The Breakfast Show for the first time, and I want to thank Pip for holding my hand,
metaphorically speaking,
all the way through it.
But I said if you talk too much or you go wrong, I'll just elbow you.
Yes, and this rib is now quite badly bruised, actually. So, other GB views, Tina says, why are these politicians deluded that speaking about a ceasefire in another part of the world is really going to make them stop fighting? This should not be a problem for by-elections. It is quite a thought, actually, that people get so excited about a motion in the House of Commons, which is not going to save a single human life.
Yeah.
And some people call that arrogance and self-delusion.
Well, exactly what happened last week. It was a debacle, wasn't it? So embarrassing. And during that time in the House of Commons with Lindsay Hoyle last week, how many more people died during the fighting? Dread to think. Let's bring you some sport. A complete change of gear. Paul Coit is here.
Good pun, even though I didn't realise you made it there, because we're going to start with Formula One.
Oh.
So, Christian Horner. Now, we were talking about Christian Horner, weren't we, on the show yesterday? So Christian Horner, principal of Red Bull. About 3 weeks ago, there were accusations of inappropriate behaviour with a person that was in the employ of Red Bull. So a huge hoo-ha was made about it, and then there was whether it be an inquisition or whatever, or a chat or whatever we want to call it. But he was cleared of any wrongdoing. Surprise, surprise, by Red Bull, and then the season starts this weekend. Now, 24 hours after he was cleared, and they said there's nothing to see here, a series of alleged messages has been sent out from an anonymous account that's gone to the media, it's gone to a lot of people in the F1 media, and hundreds of people that were involved in F1. And these are supposed messages that he had sent and exchanges between him and this person.
To some extent, this is the same old story, isn't it? Because there was an inquiry which was held by Red Bull internally.
Yes.
And some people connected with the sport are saying, look, this was not independent and it was not transparent. So even before the outpouring of new information, new allegations, there were people that were saying that the way the inquiry had been handled was completely wrong.
Yeah, and if you look at it, just look at it from the outside and think, now, look, let's look at the evidence here. It's almost like some spy thriller. You'd think, well, there's someone here that wants him out. There's no question about that, because within a day, then someone has released all these messages. So there was also talk about a power struggle as well at Red Bull, whether they want Christian Horner to be running the race inside, or whether there's someone else that doesn't agree with him. Now, we're never going to get, at the moment, to the bottom of this. I said yesterday, there's going to be more that will break, because I just can't believe that it'll be, there's no evidence, you're not going to be able to see anything, we're not going to talk about it anymore, but we know that this inquiry has gone on, which is so bizarre, because if they wanted to do it internally, they could have done it internally, they could have done it quietly, nobody would have known. It's slipped out, so there's going to be more revelations, which we've seen today.
He's in Bahrain.
Yes.
For the first race of the season.
Yeah.
Inevitably, he's going to be asked
of course
more questions. Do you think he's going to say anything else?
I don't think I think he's going to continue to deny it, because what else can he say? But I imagine that this is only the start of it, and then it could be a position where he will be untenable. His position is going to be untenable. They have to walk away from this now, because his wife is very famous. You know, it's Jerry Horner and, you know, Ginger Spice from the Spice Girls. And then there's talk that she's very unhappy about it. So this is now the papers are getting a hold of it. And there are journalists that have seen every one of these texts. So whether they're actually true or whether they're not, but someone's behind this, sending this out and thinking, I want this guy to go.
Could I say one word, but just because I enjoy saying it? Pogba. Pogba?
Yes. Are you referring to Paul Pogba by any chance?
I am, but I just like saying the word Pogba. Tell us about Paul Pogba.
I'll talk about Paul Pogba and his stuff. You could just shout Pogba in the background. Paul Pogba, he's a great footballer. There's no question about that. Started at Manchester United and then went to Juventus. Came back to Manchester United for £100 million. This is Paul
Pogba.
That's the fella. And anyway, so what's happened is that now he's gone back to Juventus and he was drugs tested at the start of the season and it came back positive. So then we've got to have the second test. So now, to cut a long story short, he's been banned for 4 years. The guy's 30 years old. If you come back age 34, the chances are the career's over. He's, of course, denied it. But as Maddie Rice-Davis said once, he would say that, wouldn't he?
4 years of football, that's a long time.
It is a long time. It is a long time.
Paul, thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Coming up very shortly, we're going to be going through today's front pages. And I also want to mention this story and see what you think of this, that Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody is the track that most people in Britain would love to be able to play on the piano.
Yeah, well, I perfectly understand that, don't you? I mean,
I think it must be quite difficult.
Oh, I think it is quite difficult. Yeah, and not least because the left hand keeps going over the right hand.
It's only the start, though, isn't it? Because the ding, that's quite easy, I imagine, the start is played
after that, it's more difficult.
Then it starts getting a bit tricky about 7 minutes in.
But if you've seen him play it at Wembley, you know what I'm referring to in 1985. No, but actually, funnily enough, I looked up the YouTube quite recently because I went to see a play about Live Aid. And so I decided to look it up. Fantastic. I'm not surprised. But I wonder what piece of music our viewers would most like to be able to play on the piano.
Please do let us know. gbviews@gbnews.com, or maybe you can already play something brilliantly. Do tell us. Stay with us. We'll be back very shortly.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
You have a president President Biden who's not enforcing the law that was passed by Congress. President Obama, criticize him or not, actually enforced the law and was deporting people that had crossed illegally. Of course, President Trump enforced the law and improved the law to make sure that and worked with Mexico to have the Remain in Mexico policy. Biden has abandoned federal policy. In fact, he's deliberately trying to let in as many immigrants as possible. More for the Democrats, more is better and less is racist.
Just astonishing. And the statement that Greg Abbott put out is really feisty stuff. He said the federal government has broken the contract between the United States and the state of Texas. And the eye numbers, Greg, are simply eye-watering. 6 million illegal immigrants have crossed our southern border in just 3 years, Governor Abbott says. That's more than the population of 33 states in the United States. Astonishing numbers.
And Martin, that's just Texas. If you add Arizona and other border states, you know, it's pushing 10 million. By the end of Biden's term, it'll be 11 million. A study by Yale University a few weeks ago, 3 very liberal professors that did the study estimate there's 22 million illegal aliens. So this is a crisis that was created by Biden. It's what he wants. They want unfettered access to the border. They're letting them in. It's a real hardship on the working people of Texas and other border states. And now it's a real hardship on cities that the federal government, as well as the governors of Texas and other states, are sending some of the migrants to those so-called sanctuary cities.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Welcome back. You are watching and listening to Breakfast with Pip and Michael. Let's take a look at some of the newspapers. So we've got Claire Pearsall back with us. Welcome back. And we've got Nigel, who's back with us too. Nigel, what do you? Let's move away from the by-election for a moment, shall we?
Yes.
What would you like to tell us?
I think the Daily Mail front page is particularly good today. This is David Neil, who was fired by the Home Secretary for revealing that our borders are basically wide open. And now at last that the various reports that he had that were being sat on are now coming out. So it puts some flesh on what he's already said. I mean, he's talking about the fact that passport checkpoints were left unmanned, X-ray equipment to try and find migrants in the back of the lorries didn't work, and even when sort of immigration teams went out to try and find people, illegal immigrants, they had to rely on Google Maps to go and do it. The key recommendation he comes up with, which is the one that the Home Secretary should take seriously, is that he's saying basically Border Force is not up to the job. Civil servants shouldn't be in charge of our borders. He is saying that this should be the job for a professional law enforcement agency. Not clear whether that means setting up a completely new one or whether he wants to use something existing. But his point seems to be we've got too many holes in the system. And regardless of what you think about immigration, I mean, clearly we do need to protect our borders.
I mean, this is very interesting. Mr. Neil was fired apparently after he said publicly that our airfields were wide open to immigrants coming in, illegal immigrants coming in on private planes. But then he referred to the fact that 15 of his reports have been unpublished. He was fired. It was inconvenient what he was saying for the government. But still these reports have come out. And, I mean, these reports do make almost tragic reading, don't they? I mean, a real catalogue of incompetence.
Yeah, and presumably that's why they were being sat on in the Home Office, because it was. People didn't want this stuff to come out. I mean, Claire worked in the Home Office in immigration and saw very similar kind of things. I mean, it just seems to me that the Home Office is too big. It needs to be broken up. It probably needs to have a separate department or the government needs a separate department for immigration because it's now such a big issue.
But the thing, if I had to give a one-word answer, what is missing in Britain? Leadership. And that's the point he's on. There is no leadership in an agency like this. You know, there's the so-called management. There are structures and bureaucracies and HR departments, but no leadership.
Well, you could actually say that about politics overall. I mean,
You were for me.
I'm saying it very, very broadly.
Claire, are you surprised by this then? As Nigel said, working in the Home Office, I mean, more holes in this system than a colander, by the sounds of it.
Absolutely, and it was quite interesting that these 13 reports have been sort of dumped onto the Home Office website yesterday, hoping to bury this news somewhere along the line. But unfortunately, the findings are incredibly damning, and I did see that when I started at the Home Office. On my desk was a pile of reports from independent border force person who was in charge at the time. It wasn't David Neal, it was another gentleman. But they hadn't been read, they hadn't been assessed, and were just sort of left there, and nobody had taken responsibility. So they had to be cleared. And I find one of the findings, the culture of defensiveness within the Home Office, that officials are putting themselves up against policy, they're not doing it, they're not going out and talking to people, and they're hiding behind their desks or working from home, in fact, to avoid going out and seeing for themselves what is happening. Now, that is appalling.
Is part of the issue because it's understaffed?
No, I don't think it is. I think this is down to leadership. This is down to not being challenged. This is down to not having a manager, if you like, as a Home Secretary, who is going to say this is the will of the government and this is what we want to do. Now, the officials are there to provide you with information, the information that you ask for. They are not there to put their own political spin or their own personal beliefs upon that.
And while we're talking about dreadful failures by the British state, you have another story here, which is about the dreadful policeman who was a murderer and rapist.
Now, this is a gentleman who should never have been a police officer.
He's not a gentleman.
He is not a gentleman. I'm being kind. I don't wish to utter his name.
His name is Cousins.
It is, and I really don't like to mention his name because I think that gives him some kind of credence in society where he shouldn't have it. The murder of Sarah Everard was appalling. The failures of the police vetting service in the first place. This was not something that should have been left unchecked. They had red flags.
He had a pattern of behaviour and criminality stretching over 20 years, which was not picked up by 3 different police forces.
That's right. I mean, Kent Police, and I live in the great county of Kent, and Kent Police had said that he shouldn't be suitable, but that information was never acted upon, and he seemed to have gone from that to parliamentary and diplomatic protection within the House of Commons as part of the Metropolitan Police.
Just to, if people hadn't read this or heard about this so far, one of it was a very serious sexual assault on a child, reported to police 8 times for indecent exposure before the attack, a string of sexual offences, attempted knife-point kidnap. I mean, how on earth would that not be uncovered?
Well, I mean, this is the question that needs to be answered. Who was the person, when they found that Wayne Cousins was not suitable to be a police officer, who decided that actually we can ignore that and we can give him a warrant card and put him out there in charge of public protection? Because I find that failure to be abhorrent, and it shouldn't have happened. It really shouldn't. And the Metropolitan Police Force, just on their own, have a massive problem when it comes to confidence amongst women, that we are going to be protected on the street, in our homes, in our workplaces, and I don't see the road back to that confidence being a particularly easy one to climb.
Nigel Nelson, let's change the subject a bit. We were talking a moment ago about members of Parliament in a rather self-satisfied way, worrying about votes about Gaza, but the story this morning is that 100 Palestinians were killed in some sort of situation, crowded around a relief truck. Not clear how many of them were shot by Israeli forces, not clear how many of them died in the subsequent panic. But 100 people around a relief truck.
Well, I mean, if this is true, it's horrific. Bear in mind, this is a report from the Hamas-controlled health department in Gaza. But, I mean, we do know that an awful lot of people have been killed. The health ministry is saying that we're now over 30,000 people so far. The point really here is it enhances what everyone seems to be trying to get towards as a ceasefire. Israel has every right to defend itself. It needs to do so proportionately, and that is what is now in question.
And that ceasefire, President Biden, when he was very inappropriately holding an ice cream, as he said it a couple of days ago, could, he said, be happening as soon as, I think, this Monday, in the next few days. That's been well set back.
Yes, I mean, the trouble is there seems to be no great appetite from the Israelis to have a ceasefire. The Netanyahu keeps talking about the fact we carry on till we win this war. Well, that is not ceasefire-type language, even though negotiations are going on in Egypt with Hamas. I mean, going back to the chaos in the House of Commons last week, we had 3 motions down which were broadly the same. There were slight differences, but there now seems to be a consensus in this country that we should head for a ceasefire. America says the same thing. Israel should listen.
OK, Nigel, thank you for now. Thank you,
Thank
Claire.
you.
We are back with you very shortly. So much to talk about. By-elections, St David's Day, plenty still to come. Annie Shuttleworth, how's your weather first?
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning and welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie, from the Met Office. Some heavy rain will push into southwestern areas through the rest of the day. There's also a risk of some sleet and snow over the hills, but the heaviest rain will push from the southwest, affecting southwestern areas of England and parts of South Wales. That's where there's a weather warning in force throughout today. But this band of rain will push into more northern areas of England. That will fall as snow over the high ground above around 250 metres mainly. So lower levels will mainly just see rain, but we also see some quite blustery showers following in behind that across many southern and central areas, and it's going to be feeling rather chilly out there today, particularly on any coastal areas and in any showers where we've got quite a strong wind. Through tonight, it's going to be staying quite unsettled. Many areas will see further rain. That band will push into more northern areas, into parts of Scotland where it could bring a further risk of some sleet and snow, potentially some ice on the roads. It's going to be a frostier start where we do see any clear skies developing to Saturday morning, but much of the rain will be restricted to eastern areas throughout the morning on Saturday, particularly across northeastern areas of England. That's where we could see some further snow falling over the high ground. Further south, it should be a little bit drier through the morning, but there will be some showers pushing in across coastal areas by the afternoon. These bring a risk of some hail and some heavy downpours, and it will still feel chilly once again on Saturday. It does look a little bit drier and brighter on Sunday, though. Bye-bye.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
The EU rules are trying to choke even that.
Yeah.
And I just think, I would join this protest in a heartbeat. And you are right to point out this stuff about them being right-wing. How dare they slate them as right-wing when these are real people whose livelihoods
And
are
remember,
being
a lot of
trashed.
people who work in the farm industry, Malone, get paid very little money.
They get paid,
Agricultural workers are very badly paid.
They get paid nothing, Pierce. And, the profits... I think on Clark's Farm I read somewhere that I saw that when you sell it like a sheep's skin, it's 30 pence or something.
right.
And you say, what?
Yeah.
And so you wonder how they can manage that. And I think after a year, Clarkson made a handful of pounds.
He made like 90 quid profit or something.
In a whole year working.
But Carol makes a really good point, though, doesn't she, Nikki, about this idea that we go to the supermarkets, we shop there, we eat our food, we don't often give it a thing. And the farmers have become so frustrated by this idea that they are not respected.
Absolutely. I mean, they're running what are effectively small businesses, often family businesses that have been passed down through generations. They also tend to know the land and the animals better than anyone else in those areas. I'm all for green protests, I'm all for climate change activism, but actually The only way you can do that is gradually. It's exactly what we've seen with Port Talbot. You know, you can't just go in and say you're not going to do it anymore this way. You've got to do it this way instead. The Tartar Steel thing. Yes, exactly. Yeah. You've got to do it this way instead. You know, lots of farmers are on board with protecting the planet, but they can't do it overnight. You've got to give them time.
Yeah.
So they're protesting. You know, they're saying no farmers, no food.
When
well,
you say
can't
you
get any more
support
obvious.
some of these environmental protests, you're not one of these closet supporters of Just Stop Oil, are you?
I'm not a closet supporter. I think I've been quite open about Just Stop Oil.
No.
I don't like all their methods, but I do like the message. But I do appreciate the message. Yeah, but sometimes you've got to do difficult things.
What they're asking for now, those protesters, are unrealistic. What these protesters are asking for is not unrealistic.
No.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together. For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Good morning. It is 8 o'clock on Friday, the 1st of March. Today...
This is for Gaza.
George Galloway has swept to victory at the Rochdale by-election after one of the most divisive campaigns in years.
George Galloway is back in Parliament after a 9-year break as MP for Rochdale, and a message for Keir Starmer, saying he'll pay a high price in Gaza.
To remove...
climate change denier. You said in the hustings that you wanted to extract oil and gas from the North Sea.
The Workers' Party of Britain leader gained almost 40% of the vote, but faced backlash within seconds of his victory. And here is the stark message for Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer.
I think Keir Starmer's woken up this morning to his worst nightmare.
Meanwhile, Nigel Farage warned about sectarian politics in Britain.
Is it? Sectarian politics is here to stay. People thought the result in 2012 in Bradford West was a complete one-off. It wasn't. It was a warning shot. This is voting along religious lines, allied to some extreme hard-left characters like the Chris Williamsons. No, this is real.
Also this morning, the government's flagship Rwanda policy could end up costing more than £600 million to deport 300 refugees. That's according to a spending watchdog.
Yes, the full cost of sending a migrant to Rwanda has just been revealed, and it doesn't make for pretty reading for the taxpayer. Find out more with me very soon.
Beautiful gardens, eternal flowers. You know the way, so take me there. Won't you make me dizzy?
Ollie Alexander releases his Eurovision 2024 entry Dizzy, and the music video will be out imminently.
And a very happy St David's Day to everyone celebrating in Wales and beyond.
And in the sport, I feel as if we should do Eurovision in the sport. You know, it's still a competition. The new F1 season begins in Bahrain. As it begins, Christian has a lot more on his mind than racing. Horner, that is. We've seen the last of Paul Pogba, probably, as a professional footballer, and the World Indoor Athletics Championships start in Glasgow today.
Good morning. It's a cold day out there for many areas, and there's some snow due for some. Find out all the details with me a little later on.
Good morning, I'm Pip Thompson.
Good morning, I'm Michael Portillo, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
It is Friday. Great to have you with us. So much to talk about politically with that by-election overnight. But just a bit of lighter news this morning, and that is a story about what most of us would like to play on the piano. Now, Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen has topped a poll, and we asked what you would like to play. Michael, do you have a... See, the only thing I can play is Memory. from Cats.
Oh, well done. That's very good. The only one I've thought of playing, because it sounds very simple, is The Man by Taylor Swift. I am a Swiftie.
Are you?
And you know it's got a very sort of dun, 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 dun. It sounds very, very straightforward. But actually I did one day sit down and try to do it, and even on that one I failed.
Michael Portillo says he's a Swiftie.
It's old news.
I would never really.
No. GB News broke this story some time ago. Yeah.
Sorry, must have been before my arrival, maybe. What some of you are saying is, Danny, the old Greensleeves song.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
you could
one.
manage that probably. Yeah.
Ron, morning. Meatloaf, Heaven Can Wait, your late wife's favourite song, and you had it played at her funeral. Brings a tear, well, understandably, every time you hear it. Randall, 1985 by Paul McCartney. And who else have we got? Now, Freddie says this is an odd one, but I'd like to play Bee Bumble and the Stingers' Nut Rocker. Do you know that one?
That's not my special subject, actually. No.
Well, don't look at me, because I'm not sure that I do either.
Charlie, any ideas
Charlie
on that one?
here, former advisor. Thinks he's talking about politics. Would you play on the piano?
Well, funnily enough, I would like to actually play properly New York, New York by Frank Sinatra, because that is my karaoke song, along with Memory from Cats. If it takes the time in the evening,
That was one of the first songs I learned to play on the piano. I mean, because it is very simple. This one from Stuart, this is a good one. The last section of Layla, Eric Clapton, where the piano takes the lead and the slide guitar comes in. A tune.
Yeah, very, very, very beautiful choice, that. Well, that stirred them up, didn't it?
More than a by-election in Rochdale, maybe. Who knows? But let's talk about that, because it was a dramatic night. George Galloway of the Workers' Party of Britain has won one of the most divisive and controversial by-election contests in recent history.
Turnout at the by-election was 39.7%, which doesn't sound like much, but it was higher than expected. This was Galloway's message to Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer.
Keir Starmer, this is for Gaza. You have paid and you will pay a high price for the role that you have played in enabling, encouraging and covering for the catastrophe presently going on in occupied Palestine in the Gaza Strip.
That was George Galloway in the small hours of this morning, and joining us now is our political editor, Christopher Hope. Christopher, the polls would suggest that Sir Keir Starmer will be Prime Minister by the end of the year. Do you believe that today's by-election result will cause him to change his position on a ceasefire?
Not a jot, I would say, Michael. Morning, Michael Morpip. He won't change his position, I think, on the Gaza ceasefire. He's held this line as best he can, walking really in lockstep with the government all through his time as Labour leader. He's been very clear. He's not going to diverge away on issues of security, on big foreign policy issues. Labour stood squarely behind and with the Tory government, and that is the difference between Jeremy Corbyn, of course, whose behaviour over the Salisbury poisonings was noted by many when he questioned whether, or said, was it right that Russia were behind those poisonings. So I think that is a difference you're seeing with Sir Keir Starmer. He's walking in lockstep on big issues of foreign policy with the government, so he goes with them. It's certainly a huge blow, though, for the Tory party and for the Labour Party. The quote from George Galloway, which has struck out here in Rochdale, is he said last night that Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak are two cheeks of the same backside. They both got well and truly spanked tonight here in Rochdale, and that is certainly true, with both the two main parties pushed back into third and fourth, with Galloway winning and an independent candidate coming second. The extraordinary thing is, of course, is that Galloway said there in that clip, this is for Gaza, not for the people of Rochdale, this is for Gaza, and that's how he won this by-election, because he's focused intensely on the Muslim population and their concerns about the people of Gaza and the Israeli attacks and trying to find those hostages. So a real wake-up call, I think, for the main parties, and a historic by-election here in Rochdale.
OK, Christopher Hope, thank you. We're going to discuss this further with our panel, but let's just hear what George Galloway did say overnight after winning.
we've got 59 parliamentary candidates ready to go, and we'll stand in, therefore, 70 Labour seats and either defeat them ourselves or cause their defeat. And there will be independents, not Workers' Party, but independents that we're ready to support, who will stand up and down the country, and I know of many already in the field who will now be energised by the result here tonight. I think Keir Starmer's woken up this morning to his worst nightmare.
Maybe then a nightmare for Sir Keir Starmer. Interesting to hear Christopher Hope say that he does not believe that Keir Starmer will change his policy. Well, joining us now, rejoining us, former Special Advisor Charlie Rowley and former Labour MP Dennis McShane, joining a former Conservative MP Michael Portillo. We've got all the formers here today. Dennis, earlier I was saying that it struck me that the Labour Party might be quite shaken by this, in Scotland in particular, because in Scotland, if you're to the left of the Labour Party and if you're more in favour of an unconditional sort of ceasefire, you have somewhere else to go, which is the SNP, which you don't have in England. And you've tested the Portillo thesis out on a senior Labour figure, is that right?
That's right. I thought it was very interesting and a fair point. So I did call one of the most veteran Labour communication chiefs and campaigners, highly respected, won't give her name, it's not fair. Her point was simply that George Galloway is deeply unpopular in Scotland. He actually campaigned with the far right against Scottish independence, which for the SNP is far more important than Israel, frankly. So he doesn't have much traction there.
He's a Brexiteer as well.
He did. Oh, he does everything. I mean, he said Bradford, when he was elected there in one of these wonderful by-elections that everybody said would change the face of British politics, he declared Bradford must become an Israel-free zone. Well, people still eat Jaffa oranges in Bradford, and he lost at the next general election.
Charlie, Labour, they have got problems. I mean, they've made such a massive mistake. Well, I say mistake, that's probably an understatement, in Rochdale. This could have ramifications, could it not, for the rest of the country?
I think so. And look, Sir Keir Starmer has positioned himself to say that after 4 years he's changed the Labour Party, so rooting out anti-Semitism, when clearly they then had a candidate that went on to make the most appalling comments, saying, blaming Israel for, effectively, the terrorist attack that took place on the 7th of October. It was a botched selection. They had a terrible candidate that they had to disown, having stood by him, and took weeks of negative press coverage, which, obviously didn't help their cause. They got stuck with this candidate. They've lost this by-election, which was a Labour stronghold. They should have won. In any other normal times, they would have won it. But it's the complete failure of the vetting process, the candidate, the campaign itself, which is why that they have lost so badly.
And the result is now we have George Galloway, a very divisive figure, and the campaign for anti-Semitism has come out this morning and said we are extremely concerned this morning.
Exactly so, and it is a cause for concern because the election itself, as George Galloway said in his victory speech there, that this is for Gaza. So it was an election based on international and foreign affairs. It had nothing to do, effectively, with the people of Rochdale. And I do feel for those people who are clearly worried about the cost of living, about the economy, about schools, about hospitals, about healthcare, and all the rest of it. They've got a member of Parliament now for a number of months that is just going to be focused, it seems to me, on international affairs and not delivering for what's right for the people of Rochdale.
The detailed result is on the screen, only the first 6 or 7 there. Can I make a point that I've not heard anyone else make, that there were 11 candidates and they were 11 men? Strange.
Indeed.
Dennis McShane, you heard Christopher Hope a moment ago saying that he did not believe that this would have the effect of changing Keir Starmer's position, his wording on a ceasefire. Do you share that confidence?
It's not a question of confidence. Keir is broadly, or Labour is broadly, where the Canadian government is, the Australian government is, Germany, France, the great democracies of the world. No, they are all desperately unhappy with the Netanyahu aggression, the unbelievable 30,000 people killed, maybe 70,000 injured, utterly unacceptable. And that's coming out more and more strongly in statements by John Healey, the Defence Secretary, David Lammy, the Shadow Defence Secretary for the time being. I must say this by-election may well be regarded as the first big by-election defeat in the Starmer era, but we can come to that later. And what they're not prepared to go right down the road in saying, in effect, support Hamas. And that is the giant dilemma. I mean, Mr. Putin's doing that. He's just invited them all to Moscow.
He's
Hamas.
calling for a ceasefire support.
No, it isn't. It isn't. He's called for a ceasefire, qualified by humanitarian. Hamas' principal and only demand, supported by their supporters around the world, like Mr. Putin, is for a permanent ceasefire. That may be a nuanced thing, and it certainly is, but let's be very, very clear. When Israel withdrew every Israeli, literally pulled them out by the ankles, dumped them in trucks who were living in Gaza, and they thought they got a deal then with the Palestinians, and 2 months later the missiles started falling down and killing Jews. We're not saying everything Netanyahu's done has been completely and utterly wrong. I can accept that. And like with the IRA, Michael, you'll remember Mrs. Thatcher was incredibly tough. Don't talk to them, don't let them on the television. And then along came John Major, who said George War is better than war. And then Tony Blair, we got the Good Friday Peace Agreement. So we just have to hope and pray within Israel. Some people say, even till you make peace with your enemy, never with your friends, that there'll be a change. It's not going to happen now with all the tensions. We don't know the fate of the hostages that are going on. So, but believe me, Labour, nobody I know in the Labour Party is defending Israel.
Of course, a very important difference in the SNP motion before Parliament last week was it accused Israel of inflicting collective punishment on Gaza. The importance of that is that is regarded as a war crime. There was no way that Labour, as I say, a party that thinks it's going to be in government later in the year, could accuse Israel of collective punishment. Dennis McShane and Charlie Rowley, thank you very much indeed. I've rather lost track of whether we're going to see you again, but it's lovely. It's lovely.
Would you like me to play something on the piano? Would you like us to do some more renditions of?
We are going to change subject, but oddly not onto the subject of your choice. We're going to go on to the cost of Rishi Sunak's troubled Rwanda asylum scheme. It appears that it could soar to £500 million.
And that is for sending a few hundred refugees to Rwanda. The Home Office has so far refused to say how much more money on top of the 290 million already confirmed.
But a National Audit Office report has revealed millions more in spending, including $11,000 for each migrant's plane ticket.
Joining us now is GB News' political correspondent, Olivia Utley. Olivia, this is going to be absolutely shocking to people. All this money, no planes are off the ground, and we don't even know that any will get off the ground. And if they do, £11,000 per individual. Really?
I think you're absolutely right, Pip. It is going to be shocking to people. The breakdown from the National Audit Office suggests that, in the end, £171,000 will be spent on each and every migrant who is deported to Rwanda. That's a £20,000 initial outlay, plus £151,000 over 5 years for the cost of food, accommodation, etc. On top of that, you've got the plane tickets, which should come to about £11,000 per person. And actually, the Reuters estimate is that it could end up costing £600 million, over £500 million. Now, Labour has already come out fighting about this. We've had criticism from Yvette Cooper, and we've also had criticism from Dame Diana Johnson, who chairs the Home Affairs Select Committee. And interestingly, she says that these costs are phenomenal, even when you compare them to putting up migrants in high-end hotels. Now, to me, that suggests that Labour could possibly be paving the way to continue that policy of pushing up migrants in hotels on the grounds that it is actually cheaper than offshoring them. It'll be really interesting to see how that goes down with the public. What I find fascinating about this, and what I found fascinating about this for quite a long time now, is the amount of political capital that Rishi Sunak has used up on this Rwanda plan. Now, if you actually look at the illegal immigration statistics from 2023 compared to 2022, the number of small boat crossings has actually gone down under Rishi Sunak. I mean, part of that is because of the weather, but part of it is because of a deal that Rishi Sunak agreed with the Albanian Prime Minister. But instead of trumpeting that deal, instead of trumpeting his successes so far, we don't hear much about Rishi Sunak's successes on the small boats issue. He has made Rwanda the central tenet of his illegal immigration policy. Now, I've spoken to plenty of Conservative MPs who think that is a very strange decision because, as you say, Pip, not only is it hugely, hugely expensive, but we still don't know if any planes will actually take off for Rwanda. But the bill is going through report stage in the House of Lords at the moment. It'll be amended, it'll go back to the Commons, it'll go back to the Lords, and it's all going to drag out for a very long time. The idea of planes getting off the ground before the general election is now looking vanishingly unlikely.
Very interesting comment from Olivia Utley. We don't have time to pursue it right now, but I suppose the government's argument might be that illegal migration is very expensive. And if this scheme were to provide a disincentive to illegal migration, it might, in the long term, prove to be value for money. Anyway, it is time to go to the weather. Annie Shuttleworth has it for us.
Hello, good morning and welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie, from the Met Office. Some heavy rain will push into southwestern areas through the rest of the day. There's also a risk of some sleet and snow over the hills. But the heaviest rain will push from the southwest, affecting southwestern areas of England and parts of South Wales. That's where there's a weather warning in force throughout today. But this band of rain will push into more northern areas of England. That will fall as snow over the high ground above around 250 metres mainly. So lower levels will mainly just see rain. But we also see some quite blustery showers following in behind that across many southern and central areas, and it's going to be feeling rather chilly out there today, particularly on any coastal areas and in any showers where we've got quite a strong wind. Through tonight, it's going to be staying quite unsettled. Many areas will see further rain. That band will push into more northern areas, into parts of Scotland where it could bring a further risk of some sleet and snow, potentially some ice on the roads. It's going to be a frostier start where we do see any clear skies developing to Saturday morning, but much of the rain will be restricted to eastern areas throughout the morning on Saturday, particularly across northeastern areas of England. That's where we could see some further snow falling over the high ground. Further south, it should be a little bit drier through the morning, but there will be some showers pushing in across coastal areas by the afternoon. These bring a risk of some hail and some heavy downpours, and it will still feel chilly once again on Saturday. It does look a little bit drier and brighter on Sunday, though. Bye-bye.
Stay with us here on Breakfast. Still to come, well, Michael's keeping the seat warm for a certain Stephen Dixon today, who is celebrating a very special birthday, and hopefully he'll be joining us a little later for a little celebration. And we are also getting a sneak peek to the UK's entry for Eurovision. That's next.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show. Sunday mornings from 9:30.
We had Grant Shapps on last week. He was talking about how defence spending is now creeping up to 2.25% of GDP. Ben Wallace's predecessor suggested it should be 3%. We hear that we've got the smallest army, I think, since the Napoleonic Wars. Numbers are down. There's a question as to whether we can staff frigates in the Red Sea. Why haven't we sent aircraft carriers? What's your impression of the situation?
Well, I don't think it matters how much you spend, it's how effectively you spend it. And we spend it very ineffectively. We have lots of scandals about defence spending. And I think partly because of the monopoly position of some of our defence suppliers, we don't get good value and we don't get reliability. This latest story in the Telegraph is that HMS Diamond, which is our ship, which is out there defending the Red Sea, doesn't have the capability of firing a missile from the ship to the land, so it can't participate in the attacks on the Houthis. So in order that we can participate in the attacks, we're flying RAF aircraft from Cyprus, which is a very long way away. When I was Defence Secretary, I ordered cruise missiles for our nuclear-powered, but not nuclear-armed submarines. And I think we have 6 or possibly 7 of those. But last autumn, it was reported that 5 of those were out of commission, were not available. We have about 21 aggressive surface ships. So we've got 2 aircraft carriers, then we've got frigates, and we've got destroyers. But at any one time, you can count on about half of those not being available because they're under refit or whatever. So we have a minimal surface fleet now. And for whatever reason, it doesn't seem that we're able to deploy a submarine to the area that can fire cruise missiles. Our 2 aircraft carriers, built at enormous expense, are sitting in Portsmouth.
Which seems to most people ludicrous,
Well,
at least with what's going on.
It doesn't seem ludicrous to me.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Very good morning. Do you know, I think that's the first time we've spoken over each other. It was bound to happen.
I want to say welcome back too, but there we are. We both welcome you back. On you go.
Happy St David's Day to you all. You are watching and listening to Breakfast with Pip and Michael.
Now, joining us now, we have the Professor of Politics at the University of Strathclyde, John Curtis. He is an extraordinary pollster and cephalogist. John, welcome to the programme. It's absolutely great to have you on board. I imagine you've been busy with your slide rule all night. George Galloway said that what made this a remarkable by-election result was that both the main parties took a thumping, and he thought that that was pretty exceptional. I think he may even have claimed that it was unique. How close to the truth is he on that?
Well, statistically, he's certainly absolutely spot on. Only around 20% of those who turned out in Rochdale voted for either Labour or Conservative. And I think that is a post-war low for the combined total for the 2 parties. So to that extent, at least, indeed, it is a remarkable result. It's also remarkable, of course, not just simply because Mr. Galloway, for the second time, has managed to win a by-election representing a party that is not currently represented inside the House of Commons. And that's something that's only happened very, very rarely done by anybody. But also the performance of Mr. Tully, the independent candidate, who with 21% or so of the vote actually has also put in a record performance for an independent candidate in post-war by-election. So there are all sorts of ways in which statistically this is a quite remarkable result. But of course, it's Mr. Galloway who has stolen the headlines, and it's the extent to which Mr. Galloway does pose a wider threat, not least to the Labour Party, that is the question that most people are asking themselves this morning.
John, something we haven't talked about them quite as much this morning is the Conservatives. They didn't really figure anywhere, so there's no good news for them, really, is there, with this result?
No, absolutely not. So they might notice Sir Keir's discomfiture at losing to George Galloway, and the way that's likely to increase the tension inside the Labour Party over what stance it should be adopting vis-a-vis Gaza. Many Labour MPs with Muslim constituencies have already been pressurising Sir Keir to adopt a more critical stance towards Israel. But the truth is, the Conservative vote down by 19 points. It's the biggest fall in the Conservative vote in a by-election in this Parliament where Labour were defending the seat. It's a far cry from Hartlepool back in May 2021 when Conservatives were able to take a seat off Labour. And frankly, in that extent at least, this by-election is of a piece with Wellingborough and Tamworth and the other various by-elections in recent months in which the Conservatives have taken a pasting. And that's happened despite the fact that reform that we've been talking about, are they now posing a threat to the Conservative Party across the UK? So the Reform candidate, Simon Dunshuk, the former Labour MP for the constituency, actually did less well than the Brexit Party did in terms of share of the vote back in 2019. So always round, no obvious good news for the Conservative Party in any of this, other than just looking at the discomfiture of their opponents.
John, I have a feeling you'll still be talking about the Rochdale by-election and your analyses in 20 or 30 years' time, and we look forward to all those future analyses. Andy Williams, the left-of-centre political analyst, is still with us. You've had time for the result to sink in. Do you have any kind of new reflections, any new thoughts that have occurred to you?
Well, I think as always, what Sir John was saying there was very interesting. We haven't talked much today about the fact that the Conservative vote is massively down. We would never have expected them to have won the Rochdale by-election, but they didn't even figure at all in this by-election. Also, not a very good night for Reform. If they are the insurgent party that they claim to be, winning less than 2,000 votes is not a very good result. So I think, as we've been saying all morning, a huge victory, I think, personally, for George Galloway, a unique figure in British politics, to win 3 by-elections in 3 different constituencies with 2 separate parties over the years is quite a remarkable achievement, whatever you think of him.
Thumping me, I only won 2 by-elections in separate...
Well, it's not bad, Michael, not bad.
How seriously should Sir Keir Starmer take this result this morning? And should he change his language on the war in Gaza?
He will come under pressure to take a more hardline stance on the ceasefire. I think his position has clearly evolved. He's not managed, I don't think, this situation brilliantly. So for moving forward, it's about having clarity on Labour's position.
And you said that before. Let me take you up on that. What would have been brilliant? What is the middle position that you can spot and Keir Starmer can't?
On this issue?
Yes, on this issue.
Well, I think it's an extremely difficult issue.
Yes.
I think it's very, very difficult. And actually...
It's all very well us sniping, but what is the brilliant position that he's not taking?
Well, I don't know, but that's why I'm not the leader of the Labour Party. It's one of the many reasons I'm not the leader of the Labour Party.
No, I think, you know, we do say it again and again, these people are being clumsy, these people aren't saying the right thing, but it is extremely difficult to know what the right thing is.
Political commentator Andy Williams, thank you very much for your thoughts.
Now, it was on this day in 1984 that the National Coal Board announced the closure of Corton Wood colliery in South Yorkshire. 4 days later, the Corton Wood miners walked out on strike.
Where were you in 1984?
I was the special advisor to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, and later in the year I would become the Conservative Member of Parliament for Enfield Southgate, and my election was conducted, admittedly, in London at a time when the miners' strike was roaring away.
Right, OK, so you remember this
I remember
so
it incredibly well.
The strike spread rapidly through the coalfields, polarised the country and left a legacy in the former mining communities. Our reporter, Anna Riley, has more.
This was Cortonwood Colliery. Now it's a busy retail park in South Yorkshire. The announcement to close the pit triggered the nationwide miners' strikes, one of the most significant industrial disputes of the 20th century. John Greaves was one of those miners that stopped working.
12 months on strike with no money, yeah. It's hard. We coped, did a bit of part-time work, and we managed. Families split up because some brothers went back to work, and, you know, there were all the bad things that could happen.
John was devastated when production stopped at his pit in Goldthorpe. He was in his 40s and had worked there since he left school.
I thought my world had come to an end. I really did. I don't mind admitting I cried on the way home. I couldn't see a future. Not that I was putting myself in any risk, but I just thought, I don't know what I'm going to do. Because I've done a lot, you know, I've done a lot of things while in the pit, but it just seemed alien to me to move out of that environment that I was so comfortable with. I loved the work, the conditions were awful, but I really didn't know anything else. The camaraderie was second to none.
Since the pit closed in Goldthorpe, urban decay has set in, with boarded-up shops and houses lining streets once thriving with trade.
This pit's a shut, it's just gone downhill. There's drugs all over the place. You never see any council workers around here cleaning it up or anything.
We've had a murder the other week. I wouldn't say it's a great place at the minute to be bringing kids up.
When I was younger, everybody knew everybody, we were safe on the street, we got all the shops, there's banks and stuff like that. It's just gone from that to zero.
When the pits closed, the sort of government never had a backup strategy for, you know, employment in this area. So everybody just went from earning good money regular money to nothing.
Filmmakers Rebecca and Dean Sills have produced the award-winning film Regeneration to chronicle South Yorkshire's mining history.
Most of my family were miners, my granddads were miners, and my great-granddads were miners, so it's like a memory film, really.
We've got to remember it because like they were an older generation, like our Rebecca don't have a clue what this area were like when there were pits here. It looks totally different. So there's a lot of areas what's run down, but then you've got beautiful areas like where we are today.
40 years on, the miners' strike is remembered by those that lived through it, but the effects of the pit closures remain to this day. Anna Riley, GB News.
For me, it's fascinating. I think all the way through this 40th anniversary year, we should look back on the miners' strike. The very striking thing is that Arthur Scargill, who led the strike, began it in the summer, when, of course, the demand for electricity was at its lowest, and he didn't hold a ballot, which meant that the miners split into two, which is one of the reasons why the government won the strike. The other reflection is that although it's so sad to see these communities, you know, who could propose now that a man go down a pit and subject himself to working in those conditions and pneumoconiosis, and who could propose now that we take coal out of the earth and burn it? All of this was in the context before we understood global warming.
But you can see how it decimated areas. And
Indeed.
the colliery now is a retail complex, Cortonwood Colliery.
Indeed.
Thanks, Anna, for that report. We're going to move on to sport with Paul Coit. What have we got?
Well, it's the Christian Horner situation. Seems to be overshadowing the start of the F1 season. Nobody's happy about that, apart from probably Netflix, to be honest with you, but we'll talk more about that in a second.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Elon Musk has announced that the first patients to receive a groundbreaking brain implant from Neuralink is recovering well.
This is all a bit odd. The product, called Telepathy, uses a robot to surgically place a computer chip in a region of the brain that controls movement.
Yes, Elon Musk says that the first goal is to enable people to control a phone or a computer just by thinking. He says that initial tests show promising signs of brain activity, meaning that patients with paralysis could one day overcome their conditions.
Not sure about this one. Joining us to discuss this breakthrough is applied futurist Tom Cheesewright. Tom, this sounds, well, slightly terrifying.
I certainly think a lot of people will be thinking this is something out of a sci-fi horror rather than reality. But this is a technology that's been a long time coming. We've been developing direct brain-computer interfaces for a long time, mostly for the sort of therapeutic reasons that are the initial goal, at least, of Elon Musk's Neuralink, to allow people who are perhaps quadriplegic to have direct control via their brains of initially a smartphone and maybe ultimately artificial limbs or a wheelchair.
It does seem fascinating how quickly this technology is moving on. I saw demonstrations perhaps a year or two ago of people playing a very simple Pong game just by thinking, moving sort of one line on a screen up and down. This seems like potentially there has been a breakthrough that means far more complex things can be controlled just by thinking.
Well, there's lots of different aspects to this technology. The initial attempts to interface with the brain used actually quite thick prongs almost that went into the brain, and they were quite solid, and so if the brain moved, they could potentially cause damage.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. You are watching and listening to Breakfast this Friday morning with Pip and Michael Portillo. So lovely to have you here, honestly.
Well,
I don't want to embarrass you, but we are getting so many viewers saying how great it is to see you.
That is very nice. I must say it's a joy to be with you, and I really do thank you for looking after me. So I believe it's time to go to the sport.
Shall we do that all that?
Yeah.
What would you like to talk about first, Michael? Although you did say to me just now, you know, we've got a lot of sport, but there's not actually a lot of sport. It's
well,
like, that's what we usually do, though.
Scandals.
There is. I mean, there is. There's all these stories and there's all these backstories and scandals that are going on. The main one is obviously Christian Horner, which is going on in F1. Now, F1 would have wanted all this put away, put to bed, done and dusted before the start of the season, which is this weekend. Now, there's more that's going on than meets the eye when it comes to this story. A couple of weeks ago, as I mentioned earlier, the story was there was these inappropriate messages or inappropriate behaviour that he was accused of to do with someone who was also working at Red Bull. So then there was an inquiry, and the inquiry was held, and we're talking about, like, 20 hours of questioning. I don't know how many questions and how long this would go on for, but he was exonerated, there's no problem, there's nothing to answer here, everything's done, and now we can get on with the season's racing. And then yesterday, a text was sent, or a series of alleged messages were sent out. There was 149 messages, an anonymous email from just the date, 29th of February, that was sent to people involved, F1 personnel and media yesterday, 79 screenshots of improper messages. There's no proof that it's come from him, but the story is that this is what was being
Someone
discussed.
is on a mission to bring that man down.
Yeah, I know. It sounds like Scooby-Doo. It's like, I said this the other day, we would have got away with. What's with you meddling kids? Someone's in this, or someone is trying to bring down Christian Horner, and I think he knows it.
Has he said anything?
No, he said nothing. Again, well, apart from denying that anything improper is completely denied, and that's all he has to say. And again, we're going to go into the season, we're going into Bahrain, we're going into the race over the weekend, and that's all anybody's going to want to know.
In the 50 seconds we've got left, the name that struck me this morning is Seb Coe, because I used to be in politics with him. Tell me about what Seb Coe is saying.
Well, when we're talking about... There's a lot about drugs and there's a lot about doping, and this is to do with Paul Pogba. Now, there's also something called the Enhanced Games, which has been spoken about as well, which is basically the deal is let's have an Olympic Games where anybody can take whatever they want, and then... No, there's not going to be any drugs testing. And there's millions of pounds been offered to athletes if they can break existing world records juiced up.
Sounds to me as though Seb is on the side of good here. Good.
Absolutely. I don't think you're ever going to get Seb Coe saying that. I mean, we did hear from him. But I don't know if we've got a clip of Seb Coe or Lord Coe talking about this yesterday at the eve of the World Indoor Athletics Championship.
Well, it's isn't it? Really? I mean, I can't really get excited about it, There's only one message, and that is if anybody is moronic enough to feel that they want to take part in that, and they are from the traditional philosophical end of our sport, they'll get banned, and they'll get banned for a long time.
Let's not forget that he was one of the greatest athletes we have ever seen. Multiple world record holder, completely clean, and where his position is when it comes to athletics, I think he made that pretty obvious.
Plain speaking.
Yep.
That's what we like, especially here on GB News. Still to come, Eurovision. Well, can you believe it's only a couple of months away now? Ollie Alexander. He is the UK entry this year. He has a song called Dizzy. And we're going to be talking about that and hearing about it next.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
So a new poll has revealed that Gen Z or Gen Z, I don't know how I'm supposed to say it, and British boys and men are more likely to believe that feminism has done more harm than good when compared with older respondents. So the polling also found that a quarter of UK males aged 16 to 29 believe it's harder to be a man than a woman, with 1 in 5 looking favourably upon controversial influencer Andrew Tate. 37% of them also agree that the phrase toxic masculinity is unhelpful. So, with Gen Z boys increasingly holding this view, has feminism done more harm than good? Let me know your thoughts. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.com, tweet me @gbnews, and make sure you take part in our poll. But I'll bring you those results shortly. Going head-to-head on this tonight are author and commentator Anna May Mangan and YouTuber and social media influencer Pearl Davies. Both of you, thank you very much. Pearl, I'll start with you. Has feminism done more harm than good, especially when it comes to these Gen Z boys?
Yes, it has. Feminism really has turned into a bunch of crybaby women that want to complain that we're not given equal opportunity when really women are given more opportunity than men. And so, yeah, I would say feminism is a hate group and it's a bunch of crybaby women.
Anna, would you like to come back to that? Crybaby women feminism, apparently.
So we've got a right lad with us tonight with Pearl and her opinions, haven't we? How could it possibly do harm? Pearl wouldn't do. I hope you vote. I assume you do. I hope you're not chained to the kitchen sink at home. I'm not sure if you've got a job, so I don't know very much about you, but you're probably, if there's a bloke doing the same thing as you, you're probably earning less than him. So of course feminism is something that it got us the vote in the first place, and it's still doing a power of good. It's just whingy men, and actually I changed that. They're lads, they're not men.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back and happy St David's Day, a strategically placed flag there, as you can see. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Pip Thompson and Michael Portillo. We're going through what is making the news today, and so many of the papers are full of tributes to Dave Myers, one half of the Hairy Bikers, who's died at the age of 66.
Yeah, I mean, I only have the simplest thing to say, really. You know, I saw him as a broadcaster, a fellow broadcaster. I just was immensely admiring of him. Such a nice man, such an affable presence on the television screen. And, you know, what a marvellous connotation it was to have a programme that was both cooking and biking. It was a formidable combination.
And his background was in makeup, yes. I was reading, in prosthetics. And he was brilliant at it.
Lovely face.
Absolutely top man. Our condolences to his widow, Liliana, and, of course, his family, rest of his family and friends. We're joined this morning to go through the papers with GB News senior political correspondent Nigel Nelson and former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall. Claire, what do you have for us first?
Oh, do we want to look at the front page of the Daily Express? I think this is quite an interesting story. Now, this is a whole piece by Suella Braverman, who was a former Home Secretary, and is blasting the government for granting 1.4 million visas in the last year. Now, when you sort of break down the detail, there are a lot of... It's foreign workers that have come over to join the health and social care sector, foreign students and dependents. Now, that will change. The dependents are no longer going to be allowed to join somebody on a dependent visa. So that number will go down. But
many students stay as well, isn't that the case?
Yes, no, yes. I mean, it's one of those funny answers that there has been such a breakdown in data because students didn't come over during the pandemic and the years where free movement was curtailed due to the pandemic. You now have a lot of people coming at once. Now, whether they stay is a bit of a moot point. Some of them will go into sectors requiring of their skills. Some will go on to further education, taking masters, PhDs, and a lot of them will actually return home to their countries of origin. So it's difficult to say that all of them will say, and you are looking at me in such a way that you don't believe a word of it.
It's my sceptical face again. I mean, I think this issue is gradually, and not so gradually, killing the Conservatives. I mean, it'd be one thing if a government said, look, our policy is to have 1.4 million immigrants a year, and therefore we're going to make sure that there are enough houses and streets and schools and facilities for 1.4 million people. But what the government actually says is our ambition is to have, tens of thousands of immigrants. Therefore, we're going to build no schools or hospitals or provision for these new people at all. That is an untenable position.
Well, of course it is.
Good.
I mean, that's the one thing we're going to agree on. It absolutely can't be allowed to happen. But I think you need to try and work out, when you have this conversation with people, it's like, well, who would you not like to come here? Do you not want Ukrainians to be able to flee to safety because those numbers will be in there? Do you not want those that have helped us in Afghanistan? Now, I know that there are some concerns around that
There's been some abuse of that, yeah.
What about those fleeing the regime in Hong Kong who are British nationals overseas?
No, good point.
Do we not allow to have those?
Anyone on the left simply says, OK, build the houses, build the schools.
But they didn't manage to do that when the left were also in power. They didn't have a great record on house building or infrastructure either. So I think that governments fail on house building.
Health and social care sector, particularly, Nigel, we need migration.
Well, I mean, one of the...
Managed properly,
absolutely,
it is a good thing, is it?
The whole thing is that Suella Braverman is calling for a cap. This shouldn't be a figures game. It should be about what the economy needs. So within those figures, you've got 106,000 people came over on the care sector. They had 150,000 vacancies. So on the basis of that, we should be pleased we've got somebody to fill the care sector. And at the moment, the only problem is going to be is what happens down the road. So as Claire's pointed out, we're getting rid of dependents coming. That will put people off. We are bosses will no longer be able to pay just 80% of full wages to a foreign worker. They'll have to pay 100%. The good side of that is it might encourage British workers to do those jobs.
But isn't it fascinating that we are importing, for example, doctors who have been educated abroad, whilst the doctors that we educated in this country were busy exporting to places like Australia because their terms and conditions are much better elsewhere.
Yes.
That does not seem rational to me.
No, and perhaps if the government sat down with the junior doctors while they're striking at the moment and got a deal with them, fewer would end up going to Australia or New Zealand or wherever else they can be paid more.
Should we take him on to another subject? Are we going to have any tax cuts?
Look,
so that's next week.
That's next week.
Next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday. According to the Eye, there's some trouble ahead for Jeremy Hunt. That they're saying that his 2p tax cut, we're not quite sure where that would fall. National insurance is a possibility, a second cut in that. Number 10 wants it to go on income tax because that was Rishi Sunak's promise during the leadership campaign. What the Office for Budget Responsibility are saying, according to the Eye, is that both of them are in trouble, that an income tax cut would be inflationary. The Chancellor doesn't have the headroom he thought he had. He thought he had 30 billion to play with. It's going to be less than half that now. From my personal view is this is not the time for tax cuts. Just because an election is on the horizon, it would be great if we actually sorted public services, if there's any money left over, not go around cutting taxes irresponsibly.
You know we've been talking about Ollie Alexander all morning.
Oh, yes.
Well, I have. I've been speaking as I were knowledgeable on the subject of the Eurovision Song Contest.
Do you like Eurovision?
Well, when I last watched it about 50 years ago, I quite enjoyed
Was that when Lulu? Was that when Lulu represented us?
I think it was. But anyway, to my point, do we have an update on Ollie Alexander?
We do. So Ollie Alexander is representing the UK this year. He has a song called Dizzy, and this is it.
Won't you make me dizzy from your kisses? Will you take my hand and spin me round and round until the moment never ends? Make me dizzy from your kisses. Will you take my hand and spin me? Take me back to the beginning again.
Now,
Does that make you move?
Well, first of all, I have a lot of time for Alexander because I saw him in It's a Sin, in which I thought he was sensational.
He was.
He's also a very serious musician with a very good pedigree. So it seems to me that this year we are fielding one of our best. I must say, that song didn't do it for me. I don't feel that that's going to be a winner. But
I don't know. It's got a little bit of a hook. The problem is what is very popular with the UK public is not the same thing, Claire, as what's popular with the judges. And last year, we didn't do
so
very well.
We didn't, but I think that this one's got a much better chance. It is a little bit sort of that Eurotrash, 80s disco vibe that Eurovision thrives upon. It's quite catchy. I think it's great, actually, and I love Eurovision. It brings everybody together. And I know that you're looking at me in the slightest manner. Even Nigel watched it.
Anything that has the prefix Euro brings people together.
So if
astonishing to me.
If you're invited, Michael, to a Eurovision party, which plenty of people have, would you politely decline?
No. A Eurovision party, I'd go for that. No, sure.
But no, I got Nigel to watch it.
Bring them on. Bring them on.
We should watch it this year,
Yeah.
So you think we have a chance for that? And do you share my admiration for the singer? I mean, he
is fantastic, and you're right. His acting was superb in It's a Sin. I mean, I think that was one of the most groundbreaking programmes I've seen. I think he's great. I think he should do well. Bearing in mind it's Eurovision and we're not well liked, I think it's a really good song, and I think that he's got the attitude to take this forward.
And he is already a well-known name, which hasn't always been the case. Whether that will be
Sam Ryder
advantage,
should have won with Starman back in 22.
Oh, yeah,
if it hadn't been for the Ukraine war, he would have done.
Well, you never can tell who wins that. What can we tell about the weather today? It is St David's Day. Is the sun going to shine? Here's the weather forecast with Annie Shuttleworth.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning and welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie, from the Met Office. Some heavy rain will push into southwestern areas through the rest of the day. There's also a risk of some sleet and snow over the hills. But the heaviest rain will push from the southwest, affecting southwestern areas of England and parts of South Wales. That's where there's a weather warning in force throughout today. But this band of rain will push into more northern areas of England. That will fall as snow over the high ground above around 250 metres mainly. So lower levels will mainly just see rain. But we also see some quite blustery showers following in behind that across many southern and central areas, and it's going to be feeling rather chilly out there today, particularly on any coastal areas and in any showers where we've got quite a strong wind. Through tonight, it's going to be staying quite unsettled. Many areas will see further rain. That band will push into more northern areas, into parts of Scotland where it could bring a further risk of some sleet and snow, potentially some ice on the roads. It's going to be a frostier start where we do see any clear skies developing to Saturday morning, but much of the rain will be restricted to eastern areas throughout the morning on Saturday, particularly across northeastern areas of England. That's where we could see some further snow falling over the high ground. Further south, it should be a little bit drier through the morning, but there will be some showers pushing in across coastal areas by the afternoon. These bring a risk of some hail and some heavy downpours, and it will still feel chilly once again on Saturday. It does look a little bit drier and brighter on Sunday though. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
Are you across this microaggression story?
I'm across microaggressions. I'm also across XL bullies.
You would not last 5 minutes.
Oh, for God's
So
sake,
basic-
civil servants, give me strength.
So civil servants have been taught not to roll their eyes. Something you do very well. We both do it quite a lot, actually.
Because it's seen as an act of microaggression. This, by the way, this costs the taxpayer, this
Yes?
training, £160,000. What the hell is going on in our woke civil service? Who cares if someone rolls their eyes in exasperation?
What the hell is going on in our civil service, full stop, if the way that civil servants are communicating with each other is rolling their eyes and looking at their phones? I mean, is the government being run by people who are essentially acting to each other like stroppy teenagers?
But I'm all right with people, because, you see, I would be in defence of eye rolling.
So me too, I couldn't care less.
But do you know why? Because I want people to give me their genuine reaction, as long as it's not deeply offensive. But I want to know how people feel. And what they're being told here, civil servants are being taught, and of course this is an area of employment law, because people are taking cases against their bosses who roll their eyes at them. They're saying they're being encouraged to say nothing and nod their heads to promote transparency and inclusion. Don't show what you really think, just nod your head.
But I think that comes with then saying what you really think, and this is the key problem, and what these courses are trying to establish. And I looked into some of them when I was researching this, and it's not saying hide what you're feeling. It's saying, rather than huffing and puffing and rolling your eyes, if you've got a disagreement with someone, say I've got a disagreement with someone. Because otherwise, you can't have an effective workplace if people are sort of just passively, aggressively huffing at each
Why
other.
do these civil servants need to be taught this? Why do people need to be taught this? This is just normal discourse in a normal working day. You don't need a seminar on it.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
A very good morning to you. It is 9 o'clock on Friday, the 1st of March, and today...
This is for Gaza.
George Galloway has swept to victory at the Rochdale by-election after one of the most divisive campaigns in years.
That's right, George Galloway is back in Parliament after a 9-year break as MP for Rochdale, and he says Sir Keir Starmer will pay a high price for his stance on Gaza.
To remove...
Climate change denier. You said in the hustings that you wanted to extract oil and gas from the North Sea.
George Galloway won by nearly 6,000 more votes than any other candidate, but faced backlash within seconds of his victory. And here's the stark message he had for the Labour leader.
I think Keir Starmer's woken up this morning to his worst nightmare.
And that was as Nigel Farage warned about sectarian politics in Britain.
This is it. Sectarian politics is here to stay. People thought the result in 2012 in Bradford West was a complete one-off. It wasn't. It was a warning shot. This is voting along religious lines, allied to some extreme hard-left characters like the Chris Williamsons. No, this is real.
Also this morning, the government's flagship Rwanda policy could end up costing more than £600 million to deport 300 refugees. That's according to a spending watchdog.
Well, another day, another uncomfortable headline on the state of the migrant crisis in the UK. And now we have a much better understanding of just how costly this Rwanda policy will be.
Beautiful gardens, eternal flowers. You know the way, so take me there. Won't you make me dizzy?
Ollie Alexander releases his Eurovision 2024 entry, Dizzy.
And a very happy St David's Day to everyone celebrating in Wales and beyond.
Good morning. It's a cold day out there for many areas and there's some snow due for some. Find out all the details with me a little later on.
Good morning, I'm Pip Thompson.
Good morning again, I'm Michael Portillo, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Great to have you with us this morning. On St David's Day, we have the flag. We're just missing the daffodils, Michael, aren't we?
Yes, I should have put one in my lapel, shouldn't I, really?
Yeah. But we're getting so many thoughts from you this morning about what has been happening overnight with the by-election, and also lots of birthday messages for our very own Stephen Dixon, who we're going to be talking to very shortly because he's 50 years old today. And on the subject of birthdays, Michael, we do need to say happy birthday to Susan, who is 60. And she says, I will be sitting, waiting for my family to watch GB News. I spend every morning with you guys. I'm always emailing to get involved. And because of my disability, I'm almost housebound. So not seeing anyone for this special day. I do feel it's going to pass me by. So a shout out would make it feel super special for me.
Well, indeed, we must do that. We must give a big shout out to Susan. And I hope that you feel that if you share at least this little part of your birthday with Pip and me, and with all our viewers, that makes up for not having a party with people present. You're part of a big national party.
Yeah, happy birthday to you, Susan. So, George Galloway of the Workers' Party of Britain has won one of the most divisive and controversial by-election contests in recent history.
Turnout at the by-election may not sound huge at 39.7%, but that was higher than expected. He had this message for the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer.
Keir Starmer, this is for Gaza. You have paid and you will pay a high price for the role that you have played in enabling, encouraging and covering for the catastrophe presently going on in occupied Palestine in the Gaza Strip.
So that was George Galloway. Well, joining us now is our political editor, Christopher Hope, who has been up all night following this by-election. Good morning, Christopher. I promise you can get some sleep very soon. Just talk to us first, though. George Galloway and his team, they are understandably cock-a-hoop this morning, saying that the victory in Rochdale will send shockwaves through the corridors of power. Are they right?
Well, they certainly hope so. Morning, Pip. Morning, Michael. They certainly hope so. I mean, the Labour Party is apologising for this. It wasn't a by-election they wanted to see take place. They, of course, they disowned their own candidate, Azhar Ali, didn't they, after those remarks emerged that he had said about Israel after the ballot papers had been printed. So to see this win by George Galloway, I mean, a 6,000 majority over the nearest candidate, who was an independent candidate. Of course, George Galloway said this is for Gaza, not this is for Rochdale. So he sees it as an international victory for people who are concerned here about the fighting in Gaza, but deeply embarrassing for the Labour Party, but also for the Tory Party that came in third ahead of the notional Labour candidate. But I think interesting that George Galloway said that Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak are two cheeks of the same backside. They've got well and truly spanked tonight here in Rochdale. We wait to see how George Galloway will take this on, as now he's back in Parliament. When he appears on Monday, he'll be pushing his agenda on Gaza in Parliament. It could be a bumpy ride for the Labour Party in the next few months.
Right. Thank you very much, Christopher. Joining us now is Labour MP Ellie Reeves. Welcome to GB News. Thank you for joining us. Ellie Reeves, is it now time for the Labour Party to change its position on the question of a ceasefire in Gaza?
Well, look, I think the first thing to say is that we didn't field a candidate in this by-election. In relation to what we have said about Gaza, we've called for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire. We've said that there should be no ground offensive in Rafah. You know, the loss of life in Gaza has been intolerable, and the images that are coming out of Gaza have been devastating. We need to ramp up aid to Gaza, but also we need to make sure that we get a two-state solution and Palestinian statehood. You know, that's been something that's been talked about by politicians, but you know, we need to also now make that a reality, and that would be a priority of a Labour government.
Ellie Reeves, do you think that your Labour colleagues, I'm thinking maybe of those who are going to be fighting seats in Scotland, where they're in danger of being outflanked by the SNP, do you think they're going to be happy that you have effectively just sort of rehashed the present position of the Labour Party? Do you not think those people might be thinking that this by-election sent you a message?
Well, we didn't stand a candidate in the by-election, and that's regrettable, but Keir Starmer took swift action when those comments of Azhar Ali came to light, and he was suspended from Labour. So he went into this by-election without a candidate. You know, when you look at previous by-elections, just 2 weeks ago, we had victories in Wellingborough and in Kingswood. In Wellingborough, we had a swing to Labour of 28.5%. But, you know, we're not complacent about anything. We don't take any votes for granted. We didn't fight this by-election in Rochdale, but where we have fought in by-elections, we've fought for every vote, and we'll fight for every vote in the general election. For us, the next step will be selecting a candidate in Rochdale for the general election who can start to rebuild trust within the community.
George Galloway says that he is Keir Starmer's worst nightmare. And he's now scored a hat-trick of election victories over Labour. He is a unique figure. He might have a point as to the ramifications of this win here in Rochdale.
But this was a unique by-election in that Labour didn't have a candidate. If we'd have had a candidate, I believe that Labour could have won in Rochdale. So I'm not sure at how much it says about the wider picture, but we will fight for every vote in the general election, and we'll build trust with voters. You know, when it comes to the general election, people will be asking themselves whether they feel better off after 14 years of Conservative government. And the answer to that is going to be no. But we're not complacent about anything. We'll work to rebuild trust in communities and fight for every vote.
Quite a lot of people were saying last week that in Rochdale, many voters didn't even know about the row there'd been over the Labour candidate. So they didn't follow the national news in the way that we do. And when they went into the ballot yesterday, there was a name, and after it said Labour Party candidate. I'm just wondering if you can be so confident that had you fielded a candidate, the result would have been very different. I mean, it looks to me on the face of it as though you were well and truly trounced, and might well have been, even if you had endorsed your candidate.
Well, the fact that the former Labour candidate was suspended was pretty well known, and people in Rochdale would have been aware of the situation. And I want to apologise to voters in Rochdale for what happened, and the fact that we weren't able to give them a choice of a Labour candidate at this by-election. But, you know, we weren't campaigning in the election. We didn't have a candidate, and I think the result obviously reflects that.
Something George Galloway said, Ellie, was that Labour and the Conservatives are two cheeks of the same backside. Now, if he's going around parading that message from here on in, that's going to resonate with quite a lot of people, quite a lot of Muslim voters, I would say, right across the country. And he's got a lot of candidates that he says he's going to field.
Well, you know, I don't agree with that characterisation by George Galloway, and he is someone who stirs up division and hatred. But, you know, not just on Gaza, where we've set out our position really clearly, but we've also set out our position on a whole range of issues. After 14 years of Conservative government, people are paying more in their mortgage bills. We've got Rishi's recession. People are worse off under this government. We are a changed Labour Party with a clear plan for the future, and that's what we'll be setting out in this year, this general election year.
Well, yes. So nothing to see here is really your line. I wonder whether it occurs to you, though, Ellie Reeves, that one of the reasons he's got elected is that he's saying something, and that many people are protesting that mainstream politicians have nothing to say. Does it strike you that time has come for people to take positions? People who take positions may score results like George Galloway.
Well, we've set out our position that we want an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza and no ground offensive in Rafah, as well as aid being ramped up. But we've also set out our position in relation to a whole range of things. For example, free breakfast clubs in every primary school, 2 million more NHS procedures and appointments to bring NHS waiting lists down, a new clean, green GB energy, bringing down energy costs for households. You know, these are clear dividing lines between a changed Labour Party and a Conservative Party who crashed the economy, leaving working people worse off.
You say you set out your position, but you've also rode back on your position, for example, when it comes to green policies. Is it not the case now that Keir Starmer is just sort of thinking, right, I'm going to be as quiet as possible about everything, and that's how I'm going to win the election? The less I say now, the better.
No, I don't think so. I've just talked about some of the policies that we have set out. But in relation to our green prosperity plan, we've also said that everything has to be subject to our fiscal rules. And we're being honest about, if we are privileged enough to form a government, the mess that we would take over from this low-growth, high-tax Conservative government. But, we've got policies like our National Wealth Fund, investing in the industries of the future, crowding in private investment into things like electric vehicle manufacturing, carbon capture and storage. This is how we grow the economy. We've also got our New Deal for working people, which Angela Rayner will be talking about later today, banning fire and rehire, ending 0 hours contracts, getting a fair deal for working people up and down the country. And these are the issues that voters want to hear us talking about.
Ellie Reeves, Labour MP, thank you very much for joining us on GB News. The cost of Rishi Sunak's troubled Rwanda asylum scheme could soar to £500 million.
However, the Home Office has so far refused to say how much more money on top of the £290 million already confirmed.
But a National Audit Office report revealed that millions more in spending, including £11,000 for each migrant's plane ticket.
Our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, joins us now. Hello to you, Mark. This makes hotels very cheap, doesn't it?
Well, it does and it doesn't. I think we need to just take a look at the bigger picture in terms of what the government is trying to do here. This is all about a deterrent at the end of the day. We always knew that there was going to be significant upfront costs because this is a partnership with Rwanda, which, as part of that partnership, there is economic development in Rwanda. The government has told us about 290 million so far. They are honest enough to say that, of course, there'd be many millions more over the coming years, but never put a price on that. The Audit Office very kindly have put their estimate on that, and they've suggested at least £500 million. But when you look, some of the people that have been sort of calculating and extrapolating from those figures and putting it at, with regards to 300 asylum seekers at 2 million or so per asylum seeker is slightly disingenuous because the partnership is different for the actual cost of the migrants that are going to Rwanda and being housed. That's at about 170,000 a year. Still very costly. But if you look at what the cost of keeping them in accommodation here in the UK is, and all of the surrounding wraparound services, it's not much different to the 170,000 that the Rwandan government is getting for this scheme. And the Home Office would simply point out as well that there is a cost to doing nothing here. And if they allow the migration crisis to continue in the way it's doing, they're estimating that there will be an annual cost just in accommodation alone for asylum seekers in this country of £16 billion a year.
Marvellous. Mark White giving us there all the points of view. After a short break, we're going to be joined by a very special guest, someone you all know very well, Stephen Dixon. This is Breakfast on GB News with Pip and Michael.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
You have a president in President Biden who's not enforcing the law that was passed by Congress. President Obama, criticize him or not, actually enforced the law and was deporting people that had crossed illegally. Of course, President Trump enforced the law and improved the law to make sure that, and worked with Mexico to have the Remain in Mexico policy. Biden has abandoned federal policy. In fact, he's deliberately trying to let in as many immigrants as possible. More for the Democrats, more is better and less is racist.
Just astonishing. And the statement that Greg Abbott put out is really feisty stuff. He said the federal government has broken the contract between the United States and the state of Texas. And the eye numbers, Greg, are simply eye-watering. 6 million illegal immigrants have crossed our southern border in just 3 years, Governor Abbott says. That's more than the population of 33 states in the United States. Astonishing numbers.
And Martin, that's just Texas. If you add Arizona and other border states, you know, it's pushing 10 million. By the end of Biden's term, it'll be 11 million. A study by Yale University a few weeks ago, 3 very liberal professors that did the study estimate there's 22 million illegal aliens. So this is a crisis that was created by Biden. It's what he wants. They want unfettered access to the border. They're letting them in. It's a real hardship on the working people of Texas and other border states. And now it's a real hardship on cities that the federal government, as well as the governors of Texas and other states, are sending some of the migrants to those so-called sanctuary cities.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Good morning. You are watching and listening to Breakfast with Pip Thompson and Michael Portillo.
Now, the man who usually sits in this chair is celebrating a rather special birthday. Stephen Dixon joins us now. So, Stephen, happy birthday to you. Will you reveal which birthday you're celebrating? And will you tell us how you feel about that birthday?
Well, obviously, I'm 30 today, Michael. No, it's the big 5-0 today. No, it's the good, isn't it? I mean, I always say people worry about getting older. I don't mind it, because if you're not older, then you haven't got this far. So every day is a blessing. That's all good.
Happy birthday, Stephen. What is in that mug? Be honest.
This is Earl Grey tea. There you go.
Well, listen.
I'm a northerner and I'm up north, so it's got to be tea first thing in the morning.
Oh.
I think I was about your age when I began my broadcasting career, so there's plenty ahead of you.
How many years, Stephen, now have you been in broadcasting? This is your life.
Yeah, it is. I've been doing it 32 years. I started when I was 18 at Radio Trent in Nottingham, doing bits and bobs, and I've been in it ever since. So it's weird, isn't it? 32 years broadcasting, I think technically makes me a veteran. If I go another 32 years, I'm doing it at 82. I'll have something to be worried about.
Well, you're having a very, very well-deserved long weekend off to celebrate. But of course, your much-loved colleagues here wanted to wish you many happy returns. Just listen to this.
I just want to wish you a very, very, very lovely day. I can't believe you're 50, and the only thing I really want to say, and this most important thing, from a sporting man to another sporting man, I very much hope for your 50th birthday, as Anne Diamond said, that you get pulled off at half-time.
Happy birthday, Stephen. It's been great working with you.
Happy return, Stephen. I hope you have a fantastic day celebrating the big O. We won't mention which one that is.
Happy birthday, Stephen.
Stephen? Stephen who? Oh, Stephen Dixon. Oh, it's his birthday. Oh, it's lovely. How old?
Hello there, Mr. Dixon. I very much missed bossing you around on the headset over the last few days. Birthday, so I wanted to wish you a happy 50th birthday.
Wow. Stephen, I can promise you that was one take only. What I'm here to do is to wish you the warmest of 50th birthdays.
Hi Stephen, happy birthday, happy 50th birthday. Can't believe you're 50. You look about 30. I love working with you so much. You are my best friend at GB News, and thank you for always making me laugh and giving me the best advice, not just about work, but life and how to save money, which I'm not particularly good at, and also helping me with my business plans. You are the bestest friend, you are the most generous co-host, and I love coming to work with you. So a very, very special happy birthday to a very special person, and thank you for being the best. I love you lots and lots and lots. Mwah!
That is really rather moving. Is there a tear in your eye there, Stephen?
Oh, it's lovely. It's really, it's really nice, and it's nice to see on screen all those people who don't normally make it on screen, like Cooper and Henry and Robin and Natalie, of course, who I know is chattering in your ear right now. So that's really, really lovely. Very
OK,
nice
Stephen.
Indeed.
Thank you so much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your birthday. May I say what a pleasure it's been to do this morning show, how much I've enjoyed it.
The feeling's mutual.
Thank you, Pip, for looking after me. You and I are both back tomorrow.
Doing it all again.
I look forward to it very much. And you can see by tomorrow whether there's any improvement in the performance of this rookie.
See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning and welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie, from the Met Office. Some heavy rain will push into southwestern areas through the rest of the day. There's also a risk of some sleet and snow over the hills, but the heaviest rain will push from the southwest, affecting southwestern areas of England and parts of South Wales. That's where there's a weather warning in force throughout today. But this band of rain will push into more northern areas of England. That will fall as snow over the high ground above around 250 metres mainly. So lower levels will mainly just see rain, but we also see some quite blustery showers following in behind that across many southern and central areas, and it's going to be feeling rather chilly